Manitoba looks cool.
All right, boys.
Yes,
Here we go live on
nice
YouTube.
job.
Come on. There we go. Now we're connected. Hey, YouTube, what's going on tonight as we are about to fire off the Merle? Yes, it's Merle night tonight. All Merle, all day, all night around SOR headquarters. It is that time of the month. Once again, let's give a shout out to everybody who is here so far. Waylon, down in Bama, good to have you here. Hello, the beautiful Jessica Lee. Commonwealth Andrew, good to see you here, my friend. Horror Realm, also, thank you for coming on in. The lovely and talented Tammy Finnegan, good to have you here. Little Marky Spender is here. Yes, little Marky Spender. For first time in a long time, he didn't get attacked spiritually while we were on a Bigfoot hunt. That's always nice. Hey, Brett Lewis, good to have you here. Joker's Wild. Merle! There's Merle in here. Hey, we have a Merle sighting, everybody. We have a Merle sighting in our YouTube chat. Good to have you here, Merle. Cable Guy Matt, remember, everybody, I happen to have some pieces of autographed coaxial cable from Cable Guy Matt. You cannot buy these in stores, people. Limit one per household. He just ordered another 10,000. 10,000 and he's going to autograph them, each and every one of them. Your choice, black or white. Greco, hopefully the baklava is well. Hi, little Tara Spender. Where's Baxter? Where's Baxter? Where's my boy Baxter? Yeah, okay. That's their dog. Their dog loves me. Greco, how's the baklava? Give us an update. Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, good to have you here. Millennium, thank you for coming on in. Gary the Spudger, there he is. Yes, Jim Christie. We're officially Facebook friends, my friend. Asteroid, good to have you back. Fabster, how you doing, my friend? Good to have you here as well. Thank you for coming on in. We got Merle here, and we got Matthew Comas. We're going to talk about these awesome ghost stories from Manitoba that he's checked on out and written a couple of books on, and you can find them on Amazon. Comas is spelled Komus, so make sure you check it out. We're a couple of minutes away. Merle, how you doing?
Doing great, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Makes me feel good. Makes me feel good. All right. Where are we here? How you doing, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We're good to have you here, too, man. It's going to be a good night. Good night. Shanna Banana, thank you for coming into the chat room. Chris Jarvis, the Phenom is back, everybody. Look at that. The Phenom is back. The Philip Matlock is here. The Philip Matlock. Good to have you here, Phil. Let's see. Doc Holiday, where you been hiding? Where you been hiding, Doc? All right, so chat room continues to pack in here. Hello, BGs down in Australia. Please tell us how tomorrow is looking. And am I alive tomorrow? That's what I need to know. Am I alive tomorrow? Because you are in the future, my friend. Hello, Spookles the Cat. Hello, Football Cat. What the hell do we got different cats in here for? Oh, Football Cat, this is your first time in here? Welcome to our chat room. Admiral Nelson. Right now, it's better than being Admiral Wilson and the UFO files. That's for sure. All right, Merle. How you doing,
Dave?
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. What's the... Can't remember the word you said. Not balaclava, but balaclava. What is that?
Baklava. It's a Greek dessert.
Yeah. Ah, okay.
Yeah, Greco in Toronto owns a Greek restaurant.
Okay.
So next time I'm in Toronto, I want to go there because Greek food is like the best. Love Greek food. There's Bill WD40. He's here. All right. Brian Lang, thank you for coming on in. Appreciate you doing that. Justin, good to have you back. Dirty Filth, you're looking clean today, man. Way too clean. All right, the future reckons I am still alive. I'm still alive in Australia, man. That's awesome. Darcy, good to have you here. Merle, there's Merle in the chat room again. Gotta change your name, man. People don't know you as Mike Morin. They know you as Merle.
This is true.
Yes. You're a man of many words, Merle. Man of many, many words. All right, everybody. We have the super chat open for tonight. Give us a thumbs up if you don't mind. Hit that subscribe button if you like our show and you just want to check us out because we kind of like the sport. That bell thingy, I don't know what it's for, but hit it anyways because apparently you're supposed to. And what else can we do? Because we got music on here. Go to our website, spacedoutradio.com. Check out our Vault store and join the Space Travelers for $5 a month. All right, people, we're going to have a kick-ass show tonight. We're going to get going right now. From the tops of the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates across North America and digitally on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. Now, if you want to take a listen to our archives, they are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, like rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR, Newswire, and much more. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. Once a month, we bring in our legendary paranormal investigator, Merle. Merle is here. Yes, it is all Merle, all day, all night. As Merle, and we bring in a special guest for Ghosts of the Great White North. Merle is an accomplished paranormal investigator out of Vancouver, British Columbia. He has investigated all over his province, along with areas in Washington and Oregon states. Merle's goals are to find critical answers, solving paranormal mysteries that have haunted people or places for decades and even centuries. Tonight, we are joined by Matthew Comas. Matthew has written a couple of books about the hauntings from the province of Manitoba, and we're going to learn all about the ghosts around that central province in Canada. Matthew's books can be found on Amazon. Then at the bottom of hour number 3, I will bring you the SOR Newswire, brought to you by Paranoia Magazine. Merle, always a pleasure to have you here, my friend. Always a pleasure. How are you?
Likewise, I'm doing well. I'm excited for the show. Can't wait to talk about Manitoba.
I'm very excited to have you here as well. Thank you so much for coming on in. And you know, we bring in Matthew Kozun now as we are getting ready for a great program tonight. Matthew, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I usually just get to talk to local audiences, so it's fun to have an international audience listening.
Absolutely. That's what we like to do around here, is we like to bring everybody all together, so we're not talking any of that political crap that's going on in the world. We just get to concentrate on ghosts tonight, and that's what we are going to do. Merle, you've been investigating a long time. We always have new listeners here with us, and I'm just curious, why did you get into this field, man?
I got into this field. I'm excited. The reason I said I'm excited for Manitoba, because that's basically where it all started for me. There's a town called St. Boniface in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I used to get shipped out there every summer. And that's where I had one of my first paranormal experiences when I was, under 13 years old. And I was staying in my cousin's, it was an old historic house. And in the middle of the night, I just heard steps coming up from the kind of like a cellar basement all the way up to the kitchen, and the door slammed open. And that's where I heard footsteps stomping all over the kitchen. Then it went back downstairs and the door slammed shut. And it happened over and over and over again. I even went and looked, and I could see the door slam open and there was nothing there. Earlier in that day, when my cousin and I were going out shopping, he didn't lock his doors. And I found it odd. And I'm like, aren't you going to lock your doors? And he's like, no, my friends look after my house. It'll be safe. And I guess maybe those were his friends from the other side letting me know they were there.
That's kind of creepy.
It's very creepy.
That is kind of creepy, Merle. Now, let's bring in Matthew. Matthew, what brought you any interest into the paranormal here?
As a little bit by accident. I've always sort of enjoyed sort of ghost stories and that, but I was working as a tour guide doing more history-based tours, and I'd been hired by an art gallery to do a modernist architecture tour. So nothing to do with ghosts, modernist architecture. And 12 people took the tour over the course of a summer. So wasn't a lot of interest. Now, fortunately, I was being paid by an art gallery to do that tour, but for my own tours, I need to make a living. So I'm like, I'm going to try a ghost tour. No one was really doing a ghost tour in Winnipeg at the time, or they were just doing them on buses. They weren't doing walking tours. So first night I set up this tour. It's cold. It's raining. I figure I'm going to go out there. I'll stand out there for 10 minutes. This is before internet bookings. I have no idea how many people are coming. I'm like, I'll wait out there. No one's going to show up, and I'll go home. And I showed up about 20 minutes before the start time. Again, it's cold. It's wet. And there was at least 24 people already waiting for the tour. So it was kind of stumbled into it a little bit by accident, but really enjoyed sort of the path that it's taken me down since then.
Were you always a believer, Matt?
I've always been a little bit sort of open to things. I've had a couple of things happen, and I've heard now a lot of stories, but I never really came in from the investigation side. I sort of came in from trying to collect the story side. And I think that's sort of what brought me in more. Now, rather than sort of always having that belief, yeah.
So having a background in museum, you obviously like the past, you obviously like history. What attracts you to the history of your area?
I think what I found sort of fascinating with this particular city, and I know with having listeners from all over, is Winnipeg is kind of a unique city in Canada, that it was very much the opening up of the West. A lot of people kind of leaving either Eastern United States, Eastern Canada, looking for new adventures, new opportunities, were coming out to Winnipeg, but it also created almost a frontier setting. There was a lot of crime, there were a lot of murders, a lot of scandals, and that all sort of feeds into the energy. And we're fortunate as a city, we still have hundreds of heritage buildings remaining, which have so many great stories, because so often it seems once the old buildings are taken down, you really start to lose that connection with a lot of the ghosts or spirits in those places.
So going back in history, where Winnipeg was really the gateway to the West when Canada was formed, there has to be a lot of action in that area of Manitoba. Because, if you think about that, literally millions of people, caught the train heading west and finding new areas, whether it was the settlers of the Germans or the Ukrainians or the Russians up in the Alberta and Saskatchewan area, the Mennonite and the Prussians from basically settling in Manitoba. It was almost like everything was a little bit cordoned off the further west you got.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The huge number of people traveling through. I was the center where all the trains were coming. And now we think of, cities like Vancouver and, their size, and even Calgary, Edmonton being larger than Winnipeg. But Winnipeg was the third largest city in the country. And from the Great Lakes to the Pacific Ocean, this was the major center for Canada. And was often referred to as the Chicago of the North. So it had a lot of activity going on, a lot of sort of excitement and drama. And I think that really leads into there being so many haunted locations, so many haunted stories in this area. Not that the rest of Western Canada also doesn't have a lot of stories, but there just was a lot going on in the 1800s, early 1900s in this location.
That makes it very interesting. I think even for our Canadian listeners, they don't seem to understand how important Winnipeg was at that time. We make fun of the Jets, because they can never get out of the first round of the NHL playoffs. We make fun of the Bombers because, they haven't had a quarterback since Dieter Brock left for the NFL. We kind of, Manitoba's kind of turned into like the stomping grounds of jokes for a lot of people. You have two seasons. You have cold, and then you have mosquito season for the rest of the year. And there's a lot of that. And I don't say that to be insulting, as my mother was born in Steinbach, Manitoba. But on the flip side, I think it's almost like it's the forgotten province.
Oh, for sure. I think that can happen. Though I will, being a Blue Bomber fan, mention we finally did win the Grey Cup. It only took 30 years, but we finally reached that one at least. But absolutely, there's a lot of jokes made about the area and kind of forgetting it. But it is a really sort of unique stories. And I was just thinking actually of one of the ones I've encountered. I was mentioning about the town of St. Boniface and the house there. Well, St. Boniface has an old historic, it used to be a nunnery from the 1800s. It was the Grey Nuns. And for those not, St. Boniface is a French community, one of the largest actually outside of Quebec. And we have to remember in the 1800s in Western Canada, Western North America, you didn't really have much in the way of hospitals or government institutions to any large extent. So in St. Boniface at the nunnery, it was worked as a hospital and it worked as an orphanage and an old folks home, and it had to fill all those roles. Now it's a museum talking about sort of the history of the community. But one of the volunteers at the museum, she had gone into the basement and she was looking for some papers, and she just started, how sometimes how your mind just wanders, and she started thinking, well, if this old building was a hospital, if it was a orphanage, if it was an old folks home, and this is back in the 1800s, like medicine being very different. She's like, how many people died in this building? She's like, was it 2 or 3 a year? Could it have been 10 or 20 a year? And then it operated as this institution for, almost 100 years. Now, obviously, medicine and improvements came in, but she started thinking, well, if 10 people died a year times 100, that's a lot of people. And she said, as she was thinking this, almost daydreaming this, she said the temperature just plunged. She felt it get incredibly cold in the basement, and then just felt almost the space closing in on her, like people pushing or pulling on her. So she says she bolted for the stairs and felt that people were almost shoving her up the stairs. She comes up at the top of the stairs, steps out just very pale, and another volunteer sees her, and right away their comment is, looks like you just saw a ghost. And she just pauses and she's like, I think I did. So that's one of the, St. Boniface got mentioned. I definitely thought of that story, and it's certainly one of the maybe creepier stories that I've came across.
Merle.
Yeah, a lot of St. Boniface. I even thinking about my cousin's house, makes me feel creeped out. The other place that I went to that creeped me out a lot, I'm sure there's been stories on it, is the Red River Settlement in and around Winnipeg. Being an investigator now, I would love to go out back to Winnipeg. Like, most of my family lives there. And I'd want to investigate the Red River Settlement. I have family ties, like my grandma, her last name was Riel, so the relation just goes from there to the Métis.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of stories connected with the settlement, with the Métis, which is a distinct Indigenous group, both like First Nations or Native American, and also European ancestry. And they played basically the reason why Manitoba exists. And in the early 1800s, there was a battle going on between the Métis or the Northwest Company, which is largely Métis, so again, Indigenous European ancestry mixed, and the Hudson Bay Company, which was British or mainly English. And the two companies eventually fought a battle out at a place called Seven Oaks, and over 20 people were killed. Now, a few years later, a man called John Inkster picks that site to build his farmhouse, which might seem kind of an odd location right on a battlefield, but builds this, very large, prominent farmhouse. And a lot of weird things have happened at this house, have happened on the grounds. And it's one of the few cases, like as I said, I'm more someone who collects stories rather than does a lot of investigation. But one of the incidents happened to me, and I used to work there, it's probably about 20 years ago now, as a tour guide. And I was with my coworker, and the house has a big, long sort of front porch, like almost a veranda that runs the length of the home. And we were having a lot of trouble with ants that year. So we had put down a bunch of ant poison that morning. and both of us hear someone walking on the porch, and we were concerned if they had a dog or something, or if they were on the grounds. We wanted to make sure they knew that the ant poison was there. So I go out on the porch, and it's empty. And I go to my coworker. I'm like, I thought I just heard someone walking on the porch. It was very distinct. It was a wooden porch. Like, you couldn't miss it. And he comes out, and he's definitely does not believe in ghosts. He comes out, and he's like, oh, yeah, I know. Someone walked on the porch. He's like, I just heard them. I'm like, well, no one's here now. So I go one direction, he goes the other. We circle the house. We're checking in the bushes. We're looking all around. We both meet up. Nobody. Come back. Can't find a soul. And he's like, I don't know what it was, but he's like, but someone or something just walked down this porch. And that's one of the sort of few personal experiences I've had, but that's one of probably like dozens of things that have happened at this home.
Buddy, you got aliens there. Didn't you see the movie Signs when that happened? That's aliens. Yeah. That's not, you don't mess around. That ain't ghosts. That's you got aliens, man.
Well, and that one too, the farm is sort of long gone. It's now surrounded by other houses. So it's kind of a weird spot to be. But I just think if you're going to build a house on the site where over 20 people died, you're kind of asking to have stuff happen.
No kidding. No kidding. You know, when you have something like that happen and you're with somebody who's a historian just like you and doesn't believe in anything ghostly, what goes through your mind in the next conversation after this happens?
I think sometimes you start trying to figure out the possibilities. It's like, okay, was it someone walking? Was it creaking? Was it an animal or something that ran off? But you start kind of eliminating those options, and then you're just left with really not knowing. And he wasn't the only person that's worked there that hasn't believed, but will fully admit to these unexplained incidents. Another one happened. I was not there at this time, but to completely different staff member. She was cleaning in what's called the captain's room, and it's a bedroom of a rather eccentric guy. He was, even though Winnipeg is, middle landlocked right in the middle of North America. This fellow was a sea captain. He left the Red River settlement, spent years sailing around the world, but then retired back to the house. And she was in the captain's room doing some dusting, doing some cleaning, and she could hear there's a big wall clock, and she could hear the clock ticking, which she thought was odd. She hadn't heard it before. And she looks up at the wall and clearly sees the hands moving and says this goes for like 10 or 15 minutes and clock's still ticking away. She leaves the room, goes downstairs. The manager came by a little later, and she's like, oh, it's weird today. Like, I hadn't seen the clock working before, but it started working today. And he just gives her this strange look, and he's like, no, it wasn't. And she's like, no, for sure. She's like, I was in the room. I could hear it ticking. I could see it moving. And he's like, no, it wasn't working. And she's like, I swear to you, it was working. So they go up to the room. He's like, this is why it couldn't be working. He opens the clock. The whole mechanism is gone. There's no gears. There's no weight. There's nothing that could make it work. And she swears that the clock was ticking for 15 minutes. Oh, so again, a really weird encounter. And I think she said a little bit she doesn't believe, but almost says it because she has to be in the house, sometimes working by herself, and doesn't want to, freak herself out too much.
Do you think a lot of Manitoba's hauntings are because it's residual energy coming back from the time of the settlers, or is it just a weird haunted place?
It's a good question. I mean, I've sort of focused a little bit more on some of the settler history. Like, we have a lot of Indigenous or Native American history, but those stories really need to come from that community. So I have talked to Indigenous people, but haven't really dwelled too much into their stories. So I think it's a combination of both. I think it is the settler history, but I also think it is just kind of a unique space. It's an isolated space in some manners. As I said, it's right. People sometimes think, at least Canadians, they're the center of Canada and Toronto, but the center of Canada is Manitoba. In fact, the geographic center of North America is basically in Manitoba. So whether that plays into it, I don't really know.
Do you believe then that, with everything that kind of goes on, is Manitoba considered a very haunted place?
I would think so. Now, obviously, I'm kind of biased, having lived here and written books on it, but I really would think so. Just for the sheer number of stories, it has attracted some of the, not necessarily the investigative shows, but some of the paranormal shows have definitely came here. Some of the investigative ones to find to hear stories, and I think we do tend to have, at least I'd say in Western Canada, and probably throughout Canada, by far more stories than most places. Maybe not as much as something like, Quebec City, like the old city, or some of the really old settlements on the East Coast. But for the West, yeah, for sure.
Merle, you want to hop in? You're allowed to talk.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are there a lot of active groups in Manitoba, Winnipeg, that investigate these sites?
There are a few groups that have been doing investigations. I don't tend to do a lot of investigations personally. As I said, I'm more someone who kind of interviews people, collects sort of the stories. But there are a couple investigative groups, and someone I also work with and I've worked with on tours. She does a lot of investigations throughout the city. So there's definitely, I wouldn't say a large community, but there's definitely an active community for sure in the city and throughout the province.
Okay, so with the fact that there are investigations going on, what are some of the, as we got about 2 minutes here before we go to break at the bottom of the hour, what are some of the popular hauntings around the Winnipeg area?
In terms of popularity, and for sure probably the best known, Hotel Fort Garry. It's an old railway hotel, kind of looks like a castle or chateau, and it's had TV shows have came and filmed there, and all sorts of people have had stories about ghosts being there. Most often, it seems to be a young woman, and there's various sort of legends behind it. Some seem connected that she was either murdered, but there's no real record of a murder, or committed suicide in the hotel. And it's room 202 that she keeps sort of appearing in, and blood stains will appear, and they'll get cleaned up, and they'll appear again. And they've had guests, like in the middle of the night, demand to be either given a new room or actually just grab their suitcase and completely leave the building. And this is the other really creepy thing. Sometimes is people swear someone gets in bed with them, even though they're completely alone, and they say completely sober, but they'll feel someone crawling into bed. And there's been like members of parliament that have reported that, people in Winnipeg, like actresses here for filming. The owner of the hotel talked about this experience. So that's definitely the most popular place, would be the Hotel Fort Garry here.
Well, that's interesting.
Wow, that'd be sweet.
Merle?
And
this is usually where you talk. This is usually where Merle talks, but you were crying? Why were you crying?
I was trying, man. Not crying. Come on.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys hold on, because I got to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. And Ghosts of the Great White North happens once a month, where we bring in the ever talkative Merle, paranormal investigator out of Vancouver, British Columbia. Yes. He's so popular in Vancouver, he is a one-named person. People walk around Vancouver, there's Merle. Signing autographs, always has a Sharpie on hand. So if you see him, hit him on up. He'd love to sign something for you. Ghosts of the Great White North, and our special guest, Matthew Comas, coming up on Spaced Out Radio next. What's that, Merle?
Gold Sharpie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have a Jets fan. You have a Jets fan in your YouTube chat room.
Who, Nuck Levy?
Yeah.
No, he's a Canucks fan, actually. That's why his first...
It's a Jets logo.
No, it's not the Jets logo. That's a British Air Force logo.
Same thing.
Or Royal Air Force, whatever it's called.
they look very similar.
I will say this. I think the Winnipeg Jets have one of the nicest logos in the NHL. I do. I love that. Loved it ever since they came back.
Yeah, and it is based, like they do have kind of a partnership with the Air Force, so it is somewhat based on that.
Yeah. That was a good time. Good time to have the Jets back.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Merle, what's your thoughts? I know you're heavy into that. Big Canuck guy. We're rocking your Canuck hat on paranormal investigations.
I had, when I was young during the 94 playoffs, or was it maybe the year before, but it was Canucks versus the Jets. I had my family from Manitoba come out for the playoffs, and I was so mad at them because I think the Jets won one game. I couldn't talk to them.
Oh,
I like the old jerseys, the old ones.
The old jerseys were nice.
Yeah,
but Mike Smith. Let's go back in history to the late '80s, early '90s when they, right before they moved, a couple years before they moved, with Mike Smith as the general manager. He absolutely butchered that team with his love of Russian hockey players. He butchered it. I mean, Evgeny Davidov, that guy couldn't find, if there was anybody who could trip over the blue line, it was him.
Yeah, no, they had a lot of, it's pretty young at that time, but a lot of issues at that point. But I honestly, if we can solve our defense problem, I think the Jets can make a run. 2 years ago we made it a ways, but.
Well, here's the problem, though. Kevin Cheveldayoff keeps drafting American defensemen or trading for American defensemen. Last place they want to play is in Winnipeg. No offense to Winnipeg. It's like being buried in Edmonton.
Yeah, no, it is an issue. Though, Bufflin, I think, liked it here. Bufflin, I think, just was done with with hockey. But he's from some of them. They find some of the ones from Minnesota they can usually get.
Yeah, Minnesota.
But if you're getting someone way further east or south, not a chance that they want to be here.
No, hell, there's players that don't even want to play in the big three cities here, let alone wanting to play in Manitoba or Alberta.
Professional hockey divas.
Do you know what I don't understand is how the NHL, and this is truthful, you can look this up, how the NHL allows players to have a no trade to Canadian clubs clause in their contract.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, and a lot just have the whole no trade, lists of cities and.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I think if I was getting paid millions to do something, I would do it in whatever city
right.
It was. But
yeah, well, who are we? Hey, kid.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate I get to a lot of the Jets games. So
nice. Hey, cable guy Matt, what you do with your hockey cards is you take them down to Las Vegas, and the sports card store there are really short on hockey cards, especially ever since the Golden Knights came in. They are buying hockey cards at a premium there, just so you know. True story, too.
I have an autographed Rocket Richard card.
Nice.
And Boom Boom Jeff.
You look like a Boom Boom Jeffrey Vaughn fan. That's a good autograph. Good hockey player back in the day. God, was he good.
Yep.
And the Rocket. Oh, did I ever tell you, Merle? I actually got to try on the Pocket Rockets Stanley Cup ring.
You did?
I did back in, oh, Jesus, what was that? 2004, 2005 at a golf tournament.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you feel it? The power? The electricity?
I didn't like, I'll be honest with you, I didn't like having it on. Like I only like had it on for like 2 seconds, but there's certain things you just can't do, Like if you've played even one game of hockey, you understand that there are certain things you don't do with a championship. Even if you don't touch the trophy, you don't look at it, you don't oogle over it. You can cry, because you haven't won it, but that's about it. Anyways, quick thank you to Grendel and Mark Daniel for the super chats all ready for tonight. That is open. Give us a thumbs up if you don't mind. Hit that bell thingy. I don't know what it does, but and the subscribe button. We'd appreciate that. Hey, Lord of Land, good to have you back. Welcome back to the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. Great to have each and every one of you with us tonight. I want to remind you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. Tonight we are talking ghosts of the Great White North. We are joined by our usual suspect, Merle, paranormal investigator from Paranormal Road Trippers in Vancouver, British Columbia, and our special guest tonight, paranormal author out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Matthew Comas. You can find Matthew's books on Amazon. Great covers on them, too. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome, Merle.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Matt.
Dave, I got a question for you.
For me?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Bazooka Joe had an experience this past weekend. I want you to talk about it. I want to hear about it.
Oh, okay.
When you went out with him. I meant to ask you that top of the hour, but we went right into the show.
All right, so what happened was Bazooka Joe, otherwise known as Little Marky Spender around here, him and I and my son went out Bigfoot hunting. And it was weird because we went out to Flight 21 where Merle, myself, and Mark back in October of 2018 had not only some paranormal experiences around that crash site, but we had a Bigfoot experience there too. And for those who have listened to the show, you know that I have mentioned that a number of times. And so Mark was sitting on a log, doing his best toadstool impersonation. My little guy was kind of digging around, and I was kind of banging on trees and doing my whooping and hollering, trying to, see if I could get any response whatsoever. And it was just a weird feeling there. Weird feeling. And anyways, when we were coming out of the forest, we get back in my truck, and we're driving around along the trail, trying to get back to the main road in order to get out of the jungles of BC. Yes, well, they are jungles. Really, they are. Mike, you've been there. You understand that. And all of a sudden, Mark is hit with a brain freeze on the trail. He hasn't had anything cold to drink. He hasn't had anything like a Slurpee or ice cream or anything. We're like 25 miles out into the forest, and nothing is happening. Nothing. Except he's getting this brain freeze. And he's closing his eyes, he's trying to shake it off, and after a couple minutes, poof, gone. Feels absolutely normal. Absolutely normal. So he's been trying to figure out what is going on with that. He's trying to figure out what happened there. Because we really don't know. Was it a health issue? Did he get gout on the brain or something? I don't know. Or was it a spiritual attachment following us from the crash site, and when we started to get a little too far away, it pulled away from Mark? What's your thoughts there, Merle?
I was just going to ask you, what was the vibe like up there from the last time you were up there? Mark was saying how it's changed. Somebody or something has moved heavy items around.
Well, you know what? We'll get to that conversation at another date, okay? Because we do have a guest here. And but it was a weird feeling up there. It didn't feel scary, but it was a weird feeling. All right, so enough of our Sasquatch story here. Matthew, let's learn a little bit about your books. You were starting to get into them, and you have a pair of books. They're both on Amazon. Haunted Winnipeg, Ghost Stories from the Heart of the Continent, and Haunted Manitoba, Ghost Stories from the Prairies. Why did you decide to write these books?
It kind of came through. I'd been doing a ghost tour for quite a while, and I got a little bit lucky. I'd often thought about doing a book, but I know this doesn't happen to most people, but I actually had a publisher come to me. And so I wrote them a couple chapters. We pitched a couple of different ideas. And then they said, yeah, they were interested and wanted to. They'd been looking kind of for something to do with the paranormal. And I knew someone who worked at the publisher through other stuff in the city. So kind of again a little bit by accident, but the books very much take sort of the approach I've taken in my tours, which and people have probably gathered a bit tonight, is I really love sort of the history of the area. So almost all the stories start out kind of about the history, and then it really brings out the ghost story. And one of the things I enjoy doing, though, isn't always possible, is trying to figure out who the ghost may be, or can you tie back the ghost to a particular event, particular person. So that's an approach I've definitely taken in both books.
All right. So as you were trying to find the stories, were you amazed at the amount of stories that were able to be dug up?
Yeah, it's I knew there were definitely a fair number of stories out there, just because with doing the tour, people would often tell me stories, or they would say, hey, have you checked out this spot or that spot? But sometimes the challenge in the book too is to try to get more details. Like there'll be places people say, oh, it's haunted. I've heard it's haunted. And then you'll be like, oh, did something happen to you? And they're like, oh, no, not to me. And then I'm like, oh, well, was it a friend or relative? And like, oh, no, I just heard it was haunted, but no details. Or I'd call up a place and I'd go, oh, yeah, we've heard stories, but we don't really know. So sometimes it kind of just went to, no pun intended, a dead end. You just couldn't get anywhere. But then other times you'd start hearing little bits and pieces and do a little bit more digging. Or I love going back into like old newspaper archives or print archives, and then you just start finding piles of information would come out. But the challenge can also be some people in building places, like they'll love to talk to you. Other places very, just said, please don't put us in the book. So it's kind of finding that balance.
Well, let's get into some stories. Go ahead, Merle.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to ask if that happens often, if people give you a really good story with a lot of meat to it, and then they're just like, well, it's just for you to hear, don't put it in your book.
It definitely happens sometimes. Churches are sometimes ones reluctant to be in the book. Though sort of I chose not, or I don't use many names in the book. Occasionally, like historical figures, yes, but from where I'm hearing the stories, I'll only occasionally use names because a lot of people, like a lot of security guards, would tell me stuff, but they'd be like, oh, but can't use my name because, reputation of being a guard is that, you're not seeing things. But for example, it's sort of the legislature building. So it's the Capitol building in Winnipeg, and it's this massive structure. And some of the guards there just had really neat stories, which they fully said I could put in the book, but just couldn't include any names. And for example, this story, this building, it's very much almost like a temple, like a Roman or Greek temple, and a lot of people think it has strong connections to like the Freemasons, to the Illuminati, and its design, and all these hidden symbols throughout the building. For instance, like there's a grand staircase, and there's 13 stairs in each flight going up, and the grand hall measures 66 feet and 6 inches one direction, and 66 feet and 6 inches the other direction. So a whole bunch of things. So the number 13 constantly repeats. So it has all these sort of symbolisms or strange feelings in this building. And the guards have said they've heard things. One example is they were in the basement, and you could hear what sounded like almost someone loudly talking or laughing in the men's washroom. And this was pretty late, so he thought, well, it's kind of unusual. So he went in to look, and said the washroom was completely empty. And he thought, well, maybe it's pipes rattling or something like that. But he waited couldn't hear anything, and then clearly heard it again later and said no, it was like loud laughter, talking. And they put down, him and another guard put down their phone one time, and he's like, we're not going to pick anything up on the phone. He thought it was kind of silly, but they hit play, came back a little later, and they could hear someone clearly calling out like names that had been recorded on the phone, even though they knew the building was empty at this point.
That is incredible. Absolutely incredible. You know, when you have stories like that, I mean, and you're hearing these stories, are a lot of these places in Manitoba places that have never been investigated? Because that's what we are finding a lot with around Canada. I mean, I've had numerous American investigators say basically that it's an untapped territory for ghosts. Would you agree with that? That the majority of places that you've written about have never been investigated?
There's definitely a lot that haven't. It's in the last few years, few more probably have started getting investigated. There's still a lot that haven't been, for sure. And when I was starting this, like I mentioned earlier, on the Seven Oaks house, the old farmhouse, yeah, it had never been investigated. And now it's kind of, in a short time, kind of got the reputation as the most haunted house in Winnipeg. And a lot of investigators have gone there. But there's definitely lots of other ones that no one has done a thorough investigation of. So yeah, you're right. There is a lot of sort of untapped locations, and especially getting out of Winnipeg and into the rural areas, there'd be a lot more places there too.
Well, that's kind of the fun part about it. For me, like, I live in the middle of nowhere, and the smaller locations to me are so much more fun because I think they're more active. That's at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
They want to talk. They may not have talked to anybody in a long, long time. Merle, your thoughts?
Yo, totally. I agree. I'd rather investigate rural, small places that nobody'd been to than places that are investigated every weekend, because I feel the more you investigate a place, the less likely a spirited ghost will want to talk to you. Whereas if you go to a new location, just in my personal experiences, a lot of times they're chomping at the bit to communicate with you. And I think you get a lot more classic evidence that way, more raw evidence.
Yeah, and I think, like, in terms of an area that really hasn't been that well investigated, is there's a place in Manitoba. It's basically referred to as the Interlake because it's between Lake Winnipeg and Lake Manitoba, which are, for those not familiar with the province, very large freshwater lakes, like some of the largest in the world. And this area is a high number of Icelandic settlers. In fact, probably the most people of Icelandic descent you'll find anywhere in the world, like Icelanders outside of Iceland. It's often called New Iceland. And some communities are really reluctant about sort of ghost stories or paranormal. But for the Icelanders, it's very much part of their culture. The belief in ghosts, telling ghost stories, it was a key part of their lives, their traditions in Iceland, and that got brought into Manitoba. But I don't think they've really done a lot to investigate it. They have lots of stories, but not a lot of sort of paranormal investigations. And one place, and it's actually one of the very few places in my books that I personally have not been to, it's called Ness. And it's located near a town of Riverton, a fairly small Icelandic town in Manitoba. And Ness was once a cemetery, and largely a smallpox cemetery. Smallpox had a devastating effect on the communities, and so many people ended up either dying or leaving. The church that was running the cemetery, or there wasn't even so much a church, the parish, the community, folded, and the land was just left. And a farmer decided, who knows why, but picked that site to start farming, to build his house. And apparently when he would find bones, would often just throw them away or discard them, like sort of no respect for the dead. And over the years, reputation developed of this becoming an incredibly spooky place, incredibly creepy place. People seeing lights, but also hearing things, and even seeing like creatures sometimes moving, almost more like zombies than ghosts, like dark shapes and different things. And there's stories of one fellow heard a voice calling him to come into this old house, come in, come in. And it so spooked him, he waded through a creek, basically up, waist high, got soaking wet. When he got home, everyone asked, why are you wet? And he's like, as soon as he said about what happened at Ness and the voice, his parents, everyone in the house thought he made the wise decision that he didn't go into this site. Now the farmhouse is long gone, but this land still remains. Bones still to this day sometimes are still coming up from the ground, and it remains a very sort of spooky place, but also a place where the community is trying to do, put up more of a monument or recognition of what happened there.
I asked you earlier in regards to how haunted Manitoba is, but let's change the question a little bit here. Are the people and the citizens there, whether they're, longtime residents, people who are new to the province or First Nations, are they very, very believable or believing in the supernatural?
It varies a lot on the community to some degree. Like I mentioned with the Icelandic community, very much strong belief and sharing stories. There's also like a large Mennonite community, and that's one, like, people, like, if there are sort of believers or stories, I haven't managed to hear them or get into them. Same with we have a very large French Canadian community, which definitely shares some stories, but a lot has a strong connection to the Catholic Church, and again, they won't discuss it. So it's almost regional. Certain areas you'll go to, you'll hear a lot. People will be willing to talk. Other areas much quieter. And I found that a bit in my book because I was trying to, get stories from all over the province. And I do have some from all over, but there's certainly some sections of the province that are far better represented than others.
I would tend to think that the more north you go from Winnipeg and probably the more east towards the Ontario border, that's where it gets a little bit more people believing.
Could be quite likely. I definitely wanted to include a lot of northern stories. And as I mentioned earlier, with Indigenous stories, unless I hear it sort of directly from an Indigenous storyteller, it's a little bit harder. And I did get a few from the north, and definitely some people believing. One of my sort of regrets or things I missed in the book is I'd hoped to get a story from Churchill. And for those not familiar with Manitoba, Churchill's in the very north of the province. It's right on the coast of Hudson Bay, and it's a very unique town. It's has this fascinating history. It used to have actually a rocket range at one point, and it's the best spot anywhere in the world to see polar bears in the wild. So it attracts a lot of tourists and celebrities, but it's very remote. There's no road access. Occasionally, not very often, but occasionally I've got to work as a tour guide up there, and it takes, if you don't fly in, it takes over 40 hours by train from Winnipeg to get to Churchill. And I tried to get a story, and they have this abandoned rocket range, all these old buildings, and they have this abandoned ship that run aground, and kind of a lot of this super old, one of the oldest forts, well, certainly in Canada, probably one of the oldest in North America, but no one was really able to come. Some people thought there were stories, but that's a place I don't think there's been any paranormal investigation done, and is one I'd, really wanted to include. So maybe in the next book.
That would be awesome. Matthew Comas joins us on Spaced Out Radio with Merle on Ghosts of the Great White North. Matthew, let's stick in northern Manitoba here for a second, because you got this story in your book, Haunted Manitoba, about the ghost of the old trapper. What happened there?
So the Trappers one comes from a community or near the community of the Paw, which is up in northern Manitoba. And the story has been told by a few different people, and basically involved a young trapper had gone out on his lines, and he'd been sort of taught, how to trap, and been given these trap lines by an old fellow who'd since passed away. But he started seeing sort of signs of someone else being on his trap line, which would basically be a poacher. Like, each trapper has their own land and own line that they work. And he was picking up signs of someone being on this line. And then eventually he would actually sort of see someone in the distance, like a dog team going by. And he often tried to catch up to this fellow, but could never really get that close, and thought maybe the person was running away because they were poaching his fur. And there was sort of several of these, minor encounters, seeing him at a distance or little hints that someone was there. And then one day, eventually, sees the team coming towards him, and it goes right past him. And he said it was very fast, but he clearly saw the trapper, and he said it was the old fellow that had passed away many years before, flying by. And he realized at that point it wasn't a ghost that really scared him. It was more the fellow was checking up on him, seeing if he was all right. And he clued in at that point. No tracks were left from that dog team, from that sled. And he had never really thought of that before. Every time he saw this mysterious sled, there had never been any tracks. So it's felt that this trapper was basically out just sort of checking up on his friend or his protege. And from that story, I haven't really heard if anyone else has witnessed the trapper, or if it was just witnessed by the one person. But it's definitely a sort of legend that's been shared by a few people up in the Paw.
Merle.
That's a good story. I was kind of envisioning it when you're talking about it. Very descriptive. I'm Métis, like I have my Métis status. And I was just personal question: do you have any Métis stories you can tell?
Some of the ones, like the trapper, it was sort of unclear. He maybe was Métis or Indigenous, kind of depending on the version. I don't personally have too much with Riel House, which is the home of Lou Riel, so the leader of the Métis people and founder of Manitoba. But I know, though it's not in my book, I know staff that have worked there have had a lot of sort of strange occurrences, things moving about in the space. And Seven Oaks House, which I mentioned earlier, the Inkster family was also a Métis family. And I talked about hearing footsteps and about the clock moving there. But there's been other weird occurrences at that house, and at another house not too far from Seven Oaks called Bleak House. And it's, I often make the joke of, if you call something Bleak House, it almost seems like you're asking for a ghost or, paranormal experience. Bleak House was the son of John Inkster, so it was Colin Inkster, and he lived well into his 90s, which, back in the early 1900s was certainly not that common. And then his daughter lived on in the house afterwards. And there's been some mysterious things. Sometimes people will walk by the house at night and seem to see someone looking out a window. It's now used as kind of a seniors drop-in center. And someone else said there's an old fireplace, and they'd gone into what would have been the parlor with the fireplace, and saw like a young girl standing there. And at first thought it was someone's grandchild, someone, visiting, but then said the girl just disappeared. And they're, as I said, this was definitely a Métis family that used to live there.
Hey, Matthew, I'm going to get you to hold on right there. Matthew Comas, Merle, Ghost of the Great White North, continues with Hour 2 next on Spaced Out Radio. All right, boys, we are clear. I'm just going to run the dogs outside. You guys can chat away to our YouTube crowd as they are live with you. So say hello to them, and you continue on.
I will be right back, too.
Okay. So you just sit quiet, Matthew, until the Merle gets back or I get back. We'll be right back, YouTube.
All right, thanks.
All right, gentlemen, I'm back. Is Merle back yet?
Hello.
Merle come back? Or does he have his microphone on mute?
Merle's back now. Merle was checking on Olive.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Good old Olive.
Classic Olive.
Classic Olive. We got about 2.5 minutes, boys. And there goes Merle's fingers. Is he going to Jeff? Is he going into YouTube? What's he typing?
I'm going into YouTube. I'm going to Chris Moe.
Go Chris Moe. Go Chris Moe right there. All right. Merle had to check on Olive. There he is. Hey, Darcy. How you doing, man? You having fun yet there, Matthew, or what?
Oh yeah, no, it's I've done a lot of radio interviews, but usually the short segments, so it's kind of a different for a long format show.
Right on. Right on. Well, we're glad you're here, man. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it. I'm a bit of a night owl too, so it kind of works out okay.
All right, 1 second. All right. We got about 45 seconds, guys.
Metal detecting with Jarhead.
Yes. It's our resident Marine that comes on in.
I metal detect now. It's my new thing.
I'd like to try that. Hey, SJ, good to have you here tonight. Hey, I want to say a big thank you to both Grendel and Mark for the super chats. Do us a favor, support this show by giving us a thumbs up if you don't mind. Hit that bell thingy. Don't know what it does, but hit it anyways. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and you can do a little shopping at the SOR Vault on our website and join the Space Travelers for just $5 a month. Here we go with hour number 2. Music's on, gentlemen.
With Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is underway tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. We do really appreciate you taking the time out to join us. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates across North America and on the digital side on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. Remember, you can check out all of our archives for free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Mucopurulent. Mucopurulent is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. Tonight we are talking Ghosts of the Great White North. Yes, Merle from Paranormal Road Trippers is here. I love that name much better, Merle. Much, much better. And we have a special guest as well. We have paranormal author Matthew Comas, who has a couple of books out from his home province of Manitoba, talking about the weird and strange hauntings around his province. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
No problem, Merle. Always good to have the Merle here. Gentlemen, as we continue on this adventure, learning about the ghosts of Manitoba, and we're going to stick with your book, Haunted Manitoba, Matt. And, in the north, you have the Sam Waller Museum. Museums are always very, very known to have some spooky things happening there. What's happening at the Sam Waller Museum?
So the Sam Waller Museum, it's kind of a unique museum in some ways, because it was started by, as the name implies, Sam Waller, who would sort of just collect anything he found interesting. He had a flea, like an actual flea circus at one point, and just this weird variety of things and collections that he'd put together. And it started as almost like a hobby museum, something that he had in his own home. In fact, you'd even have a sign saying, if you can't find the museum curator, check the garden. And then he would come and show people around. But as the collections grew and grew, and he also got older, it was eventually taken over by the town of the Paws up in northern Manitoba and moved into an old historic building in the town. And now it has, professional curator and staff. And they've had a lot of kind of just weird things, not often seeing things, but much more common hearing things. One time, the director was sort of up in their office, and they knew the curator was setting up for this special exhibit. They were having a big sporting competition up there, and they thought they'd heard them go out and then come back in, and then right away kind of go out and come back in again. And they thought, maybe they forgot something, forgot their keys. And then a little while later, again, they could hear them coming in and out, and thought, well, that was fast. Like, I guess their errands didn't take that long. And this went on kind of a few times, but didn't give it too much thought. Like a lot of sometimes unexplained or weird things, you're not always thinking of it at the time so much. But eventually went down, and curator, again, is coming in from outside and just sort of asked, like, did you make a few trips, or had you forgot something? And they were confused because they had just left the first time and had just gotten back. All these other times is someone coming and going, walking, opening the door that was kept locked. It wasn't as if it was like, public or people just wandering in. They had no idea. They hadn't been back to the building the whole time. Again, the door was locked when they got there, so no clue who was going in and out of this building. And the ghost doesn't always seem to be necessarily too scary, so they almost wonder if it's Sam Waller himself who sort of dedicated his life to these collections and artifacts, if he's sort of just keeping an eye on the staff. But they're not entirely sure, because the building also at one point held the jail in the town. So they know some people passed away in the jail. They know during, speaking of pandemics, with what's going on now, when there's a pandemic in the town, the building had been used as a makeshift hospital. So they're not really sure where the strange occurrences come from, but they have a couple different ideas.
So with those strange occurrences, do you think he's just proud of his collections, that he's sticking around just to make sure that everybody could enjoy them the way he did?
It seems to be, as I said, like some places, like earlier when I mentioned Ness, like the old, what used to be the cemetery, people are very frightened of that space, very scared to be there. And this talk of voices, sort of calling them out into, to the land, which is very swampy, very spooky. But Sam Waller, they don't really have that impression. So that's why I think they've never seen his ghosts, so they don't know for sure. But they think it's more just somebody just checking up on things. Whenever there seems to be a new exhibit or new event too, that's when things start to happen a little more, which would also fit in with the idea that it's the former curator, still checking up, still, as you said, maybe showing that pride in his life's work.
I got a two-part question for you. One, can you tell our listeners who Louis Riel is? And number two, have there been any paranormal encounters with the suspect ghost of Louis Riel?
So Louis Riel, as mentioned, would be the sort of leader of the Métis people. And again, the Métis being an ancestry background of often French, so sometimes Scottish, and Indigenous, so First Nations. And Louis Riel wouldn't necessarily be the first Métis leader, that maybe more someone like Cuthbert Grant, but became the leader when Hudson Bay Company had sort of control of the land, and basically was going to give that control over to what was viewed as being Canada. But the British society in Eastern Canada didn't have any respect for the people already here, for the Indigenous people, for the Métis people. They just saw that they could sort of go in and take it over. And Louis Riel really wanted to make sure that the rights of the Métis and also the rights of sort of all the people in Manitoba were respected. Government of Canada didn't agree with that, so he fought a rebellion against Canada, and for many years was viewed basically sort of as a traitor, and eventually was actually executed by the government, Canadian government. But that role has very much changed now, and seeing rather than a traitor, he was someone that stood up for Manitoba and played a key role in the founding of Manitoba as a province. And of course, statues have been talked about a lot lately. There's a very prominent statue of him, at the legislature, and he's often referred to as the founder of Manitoba. His ghost itself, I haven't really heard too much. I have heard stuff about his house, where he basically lay in state, like his house being haunted, but not necessarily people seeing his image itself. Where he's buried, which is the St. Boniface Cathedral, people have also talked about hearing things and seeing things in that cemetery. But I don't know if there's ever been a report of actually Lou Riel being the ghost. It's a good question, but I can't say I've heard about him being witnessed as a ghost. But definitely sort of some supernatural events certainly connected to his life and some of the places he visited, for sure.
And that's part of the history that many Canadians even forget. Like, hearing you guys talk about it, all of a sudden I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I remember that happening now. Reading about that in school and learning about that type of history, and when you have, Canada doesn't have a lot of the bigger name founders like the United States, where, people in the United States, they can lift off, dozens of their founding fathers and historic figures that have helped forge that country. But up here in Canada, we really don't have that. And considering the fact that, you look at the United States with Gettysburg and the big battles that happened during the Civil War and the expansion out west and the Wild West and the Alamo and so on and so forth, Custer's Last Stand. We know about all of those. Manitoba has a very big battlefield there due to the whole Louis Riel history and versus Canada, and lots of people died in that great battle. How haunted is that area?
I think it's kind of depends on some of the locations, like Upper Fort Garry, which is where some of it took place. Don't hear too much about here. A few stories, but the fort's been demolished. A lot of the land's been changed. I know I keep coming back to Seven Oaks House. That was an earlier battle, though still involved the Métis in the earlier 1800s, and that land seems to have a lot of things connected to it. And Lower Fort Garry, which was not directly involved so much in the battles, those soldiers were sort of posted there, but it's an old stone fur trading fort. It has numerous ghost stories. Almost every building in the fort seems to have something going on there with the supernatural. So whether that's connected to some of the fighting or whether it's, for other reasons, it's sort of unclear. So there's some connected to it, but it's certainly, like Manitoba had more of these sort of rebellions and fights and changes than a lot of the other provinces in Canada. But again, I think it was part of that being that gateway, that frontier to the west that's led to it.
What are some of those famous battles that led to the hauntings? Could you give us a couple?
Battle of Seven Oaks would clearly be the largest. Again, going sort of back to that same site, it involved not too wise governor of the Hudson Bay Company that basically saw Cuthbert Grant and his group of Métis going through the land and decided to leave the fort where he had, his cannons and walls and everything, and ride out to meet them. The two groups meet, words are exchanged, and no one knows exactly, how the first shot was fired. But for the Hudson Bay men, they were largely clerks and people that were working, farmers. They weren't experienced soldiers. The Métis group tended to be people who'd spent their whole lives living on the land, hunting. They were very experienced marksmen and horseback riders. So when the first shots are fired, all the Métis take cover. They, hit the ground, where most of the British soldiers remain standing. And in fact, they saw so many men fall, a lot of them thought they were victorious. But the Métis were basically just reloading their guns and returned fire. And it was became a very lopsided battle with about, I think it's 21 of the British soldiers being killed to only one from the Métis side. And had, kind of a big effect sort of at the time of establishing sort of their right to the territory and the land. But ultimately, the British brought in more soldiers and still took over the space, and the Métis were forced further west. But it is still viewed as a very clear victory and one that is celebrated. And some of the ghost or paranormal events connected to that battle, the area's now been developed, so it's not like a battlefield. It's a residential neighborhood. There is a monument to the battle, but otherwise, you don't really have the sites. But there's a back lane very near the monument, and people have heard like marching footsteps in this lane. They've been walking down it at night, and they've heard like, not just one person, but as a whole group of people marching behind them. They look behind, nobody's there. And a number of people have heard these very heavy footsteps. Other people, including the caretaker, the property there, he said some nights he would hear like horses, even though what had once been a farm was no longer farm. The horses were long gone. And he would even hear, what freaked him out the most was sometimes screams, he said, coming from the area. So that all seems to connect back to that particular battle.
How haunted are the Central Plains?
The Plains have a few different stories. One that became quite known involved an Indigenous story with the White Horse, and basically involved. I just want to kind of have the details right, but two First Nations groups that were feuding, but involved the story of a young brave who's going to marry the chief's daughter. And the other chief was very much against this. And when they went to attack the group, the young couple saw this coming and jumped on a white stallion. And this horse had been given as a gift. It was very rare horse, especially up here. And the two jump on the horse and ride off from the camp, but they're pursued by the warriors. And basically, he wants her just to leave him behind because the horse, as fast as the horse is, it can't take both of them. She doesn't want to be separate from her, brand new husband. It's very much almost a young love type story. So try as hard as the horse can. Eventually, the warriors catch up and start shooting their arrows, and the arrows hit the young couple, and they fall from the stallion. No one is ever able to capture the horse. They said it was too wild, it was too fast, as prized as this horse was. And people for years after this incident would see the stallion running on the plains. But then they said people were still spotting this horse 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, which point the horse could, of course, not, live naturally. 100 years later, running out on the plains. And it's become the legend of this white horse that sometimes you can see it running across the fields. And the legend became so well known. It's actually kind of a weird side note. They wanted to recognize it with a statue. So out on Highway number 1, the Trans-Canada Highway, near a community called St. Francis Xavier, which is a Métis community, there is a white horse statue. And almost everyone I talk to they know the statue, but they don't know the story. But it's very rare, because you think, how often are statues built for a ghost? And then they actually said, especially for a ghost animal, it might be the only statue, in the world that was actually constructed about a ghost animal. It's not a statue of a horse that then people thought was a ghost. The statue was actually made to remember the ghost itself. So it's kind of a strange but interesting sort of place to stop, for a rest or to take pictures traveling along the highway. Interesting.
I got another two-part question for you. Thomas Scott, can you tell our listeners who that is? And have there been any paranormal experiences or stories about his execution site?
So Thomas Scott was coming into the rebellion and was put to death by the Royal and the Métis government. And it's kind of I don't know directly with him. Like, there's been a few. The only story I really have with where he was executed involves at Upper Fort Garry, and it was actually sort of Christmas time, and someone was in one of the buildings, and he thought he saw a very old gentleman in the house, even though he was supposed to be alone, like in the lodgings, and this completely sort of spooked him. Now, one version of it has that it turned out it actually was a real person who had traveled in the middle of the night, and the fellow was just very old and dressed in kind of old style clothes. And the other version is, the ghost just vanished, but they don't fit the description of Scott, this particular ghost. It's a much older fellow, and it just doesn't really fit back to that time. So I don't know if it's just because, like, the site of the execution got effectively kind of torn down. New roads, new developments have taken over the land. If that's why, or if I'm also not sure if anyone's really done too much investigation, like on the site. All that remains of the fort, where like this sort of battle and execution stuff happened, is just the gate. The rest of it has been torn down, so it's just kind of tucked behind a couple buildings. You can find the old fur trading gate, but not too many stories connected to that actual spot.
Any hauntings from the Red River Rebellion?
Again, not so much. There is a lot, as I said, connected a little bit after, like with Lower Fort Garry having. And this was also a large fur trading fort that still stands, and they've had a number of incidents in several of their buildings. So though there wasn't a battle, actually fought at that spot, there were certainly connections. Probably one of the spookier ones, but does not seem to have any connection to the battle, was called still standing, the Engineer's Cottage, and it's built just outside the fort. And in the 1970s, they were doing restoration work. The fort's now a National Historic Site. Like, it's open for tourists. People can come and visit. And they were restoring this cottage, and weird things were happening. Like, there was an archaeology team on site, and things would go, they'd put down their trowel and then it would go missing, or just things were getting moved around. Couldn't really explain it. But then it started more escalating. And to the point that people were actually getting, a little bit freaked out by being on the property. And a psychic came and visited, and she was getting these strong feelings of a girl. So that's why I said we know it doesn't seem to fit with the battle. But this presence of a young girl, and this confused, the historians, archaeologists, because they weren't aware of any children being connected to this particular building. So they did a bit more research, and then they actually found out, though there weren't children living in the house initially, for a while it was used as a TB hospital, tuberculosis hospital for children. And they know some of these, children didn't survive the disease. They passed away in the house. So they thought, okay, maybe that's the connection. But time went on. They continued with the restoration work. They brought in like period furniture, fixed the walls, everything. And then about 2 days before the grand opening to the public, so again, this is early mid-1970s, they were getting everything ready, and they showed up to just do the finishing details. And they came into the cottage, and they found furniture tipped over and curtains pulled down and objects, thrown about. And they were at first really angry because they thought someone had broken in, someone had vandalized the site, they'd put all this work into it, but they could hear noises coming from inside. So they went further in, and they said it was like a creaking sound. And then they went into the parlor, said there was a young girl in kind of like an old nightgown sitting in the rocking chair, rocking back and forth. And they could clearly hear her saying, "I'm so sorry for the mess. I'm sorry for the mess. I'm sorry for the mess." And they bolted. They said they were so scared, they just took off running right out of the building. Got the rest of the team, came back, and she was gone. But it certainly was one of the spookiest ones to have happened there, and a number of people have reported this girl in the cottage over the years.
Matt, I'm going to get you to hold on. Matthew Comas, you can find his books on Amazon. Merle is with us from Paranormal Road Trippers. Ghosts of the Great White North continues right after this on Spaced Out Radio. Good job, man. Good job.
Yeah, thanks.
Good segment.
Yeah, you'd think Thomas Scott should have a ghost, but if he does, I've never heard about it.
Damn,
yeah,
Thomas Scott. Yes, Merle.
I thought you were going to talk about your brother Thomas Scott, Dave Scott.
No. Don't worry.
No?
My audience already knows that Scott isn't my real last name.
I know. But yes.
Go ahead, Merle Bird.
Oh, I forget what I was going to say now, Dave. It wasn't relevant anyways.
The old relevance thing, eh?
Classic relevance scandal.
Classic relevance. You're a good storyteller, Matt.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome, man. That's what we do.
I did a improv event or festival for the first time this fall, and I was a little reluctant initially, but they're like, "Yeah, we just want you to tell ghost stories, and we're going to base the improv on the ghost stories." So that was kind of a fun event and something a little bit out of my wheelhouse to do.
Well, that'd be kind of freaky.
Yeah, it was normally improv, of course, they're always trying for the laugh, but this was a couple days before Halloween, and they wanted to do a spooky night of improv. So,
oh, cool. That's actually really cool.
So yeah, instead of asking the audience for ideas, I would come out, tell a story for a few minutes. They would do some improv. I would come out, tell another story. So it was kind of fun. It was a neat idea.
Merle likes a good storytelling time.
I love story time.
Yeah. That's why you're the Merle man.
I know. White Lake as well. I used to go to or is it called White Shell Lake? I forget.
Yeah, there's White Shell.
Yeah,
there's so many lakes. There's probably a White Lake too.
Yeah, it's White Shell Lake.
Yeah. I
used to go there a lot, and when we would tent there, my aunt would always tell me to watch out for the ghosts. Are there any stories coming out of that area?
I don't have any, but I'm sure there are. Like, I sort of ran out of time. I know there's some stories coming from Kenora, which of course is Ontario instead of Manitoba, though I was thinking of it including it anyways, but I just ran out of time to kind of collect the stories. But so offhand, I'm not able to give one, but I'm sure there are some stories.
Or like Enola? Anything out of Enola, Manitoba?
I haven't heard anything out of Enola. Some of the small towns were tough. Like I sent out feelers to a lot of places, but some of those towns, it's I think unless you really know someone there, it's hard to get the people to talk.
Yeah, I have a bunch, like my aunt and a bunch of cousins live in Enola, and also St. Vital and St. Boniface. Lots of family there.
Yeah, and St. Boniface definitely has a few.
Have you ever?
I mean, it's also very old.
Have you ever talked to Grant Cameron?
Don't think so.
Oh, you gotta try that. Grant's in Winnipeg, and he is one of the top UFO researchers out there. And he had a major sighting with a few others that they nicknamed Charlie Red Star in just outside of Carmen.
Said Grant Cameron is the name?
Yeah. Go on Amazon. He has about 40 books out there.
Yeah, and I'll have to try to track him down. Well, in the White Shell area would be close to like the Falcon Lake alien sighting.
Yeah. Merle doesn't like the aliens.
Similar area.
Is there any good ghost?
Yeah, I don't.
Any good ghost sightings since that incident?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, that incident's pretty. Like, I'm not big into following the again with aliens, but that incident is really well known in Manitoba. Like, I think most people know about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one was the one that even made into a coin, since the mint is in Winnipeg.
They made that into a coin, and it was funny because when we inquired about that, they said, "Oh well, it's part of Canada's heritage." Really? Since when is alien encounters and UFO encounters part of Canada's heritage? That one I didn't understand. All right, guys, here we go. We're about to get going here, so just stay tuned, and we'll be right back here. We pass the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio, and tonight I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate you taking the time. I want to remind all of you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. We bring in Merle from Paranormal Road Trippers, formerly of Haunted Crew of Canada. No, I'm teasing. He's still part of that. And we bring in Matthew Comas here, as he is our special guest on Ghosts of the Great White North. And we are talking about Matthew's research into the hauntings from the Canadian province of Manitoba. You can find Matthew's 2 books on Amazon, and they are called Haunted Manitoba, Ghost Stories from the Prairies. And the other one is called Haunted Winnipeg. I love the covers here. I just get lost in the covers. Ghost Stories from the Heart of the Continent. That's always good. All right. I got a question from Big Cat here. What's with all the ghosts at Fort Garry?
It's a good question. I think there's so many ghosts at Lower Fort Garry because it was so many different things. It's an old stone fur trading fort. So it had connections to soldiers that were brought here, but it also had connections to the RCMP, like the Mounties, as their sort of first training facility. But the place was also used as the first penitentiary prison for the province. When people were being held there, it was at one point an asylum. People were being, again, effectively chained up. And in addition to that, the big house, or the governor's house, became the headquarters for a motor club, kind of a country club sort of thing. And there's talk of that at this club. There's a lot of fights or brawls sometimes in the bar. in this governor's house. So it just seemed like a lot of things happened there. So I mentioned like the ghost of the young girl in the cottage, but there's also a ghost of a man walking around on top floors and walking right through walls. There's people hearing footsteps fairly often, and just many sort of strange occurrences. So I think it's just, even though there wasn't, say, like one big battle fought there, I think there's just a whole bunch of incidents and things over time that have led to there being so many hauntings on that site.
Interesting. Tell us a little bit about the spirits of Winnipeg, because for a lot of people who may not be familiar with the city that you were in, there is, as you said in hour number one, a long history of this, of especially being the gateway to Western Canada here. Let's start with some of these famous buildings here in Winnipeg. Like, let's go to a couple theaters. The Walker Theater. What's happening there?
So the Walker Theater is actually kind of one of my favorite ones. It's was built very late, very early 1900s. And Winnipeg, as I said, it was a prominent city in Canada, but still not that large a city. And it was seen as being very remote. And the Walker family, they wanted to change that. They wanted to bring in the biggest, the best shows. What was playing in New York or London, they wanted to have come to Winnipeg, which at the time was almost viewed as like a ridiculous idea. So they built this large, gorgeous theater, which is still actually used to this day as a performance space. And they would bring in these performers from New York, from London, from Toronto, Boston. Sometimes they would even have to set up whole tours in the West to attract them. So it's where you'd go for the symphony and the ballet, not so much vaudeville shows, more kind of highbrow productions. Now, this building has had a lot of strange things. Security guards have told a lot of stories. It seems kind of weird, but stuff involving like the doors. One security guard had been told to make sure the dressing room doors remained open because they were actually concerned when the doors got shut, some of the rooms were getting so cold, pipes could potentially freeze. So he had walked through, said all the doors were open, everything was fine. A couple hours later, it's time to do his rounds again. He found all the doors shut. Now you might think, okay, maybe it's an old building and they, move, or maybe the floor is sloped. He said, no. He's like, there were door stops holding these doors open. All the door stops were knocked into the hallway. Nobody else was in the building. He was in it completely by himself. Another time he was trying to close these heavy metal fire doors. So they just wouldn't move. He was pushing, pulling, couldn't get them to move at all. Eventually just said, forget it. Walks away, goes about 20, 30 feet, hears this loud banging sound, turns around and find the doors that he couldn't move an inch. He said it slammed shut by themselves. And he also had sometimes a dog with him, especially when there were concerts. And he said this dog was used for security work and was really obedient, really good dog for that type of work. But at the Walker Theater, this dog would just freak out. It'd start loudly barking. It wouldn't want to go in certain spaces, or would bark when he couldn't see anything. And often people think that animals are sensing or seeing something that humans cannot. But there's also been sightings, and this fits into kind of the story, or one of the stories at the Walker. Sometimes this younger couple have been seen either standing on stage when people have came in, and the stories vary. Some just talk about them standing, then almost just vanishing. Other times people said they've seen the couple walk across the stage and then basically just walk right through the back wall. People have been up in the balcony and looked down, seeing this couple standing on stage. But over the years, there's been numerous sightings of sort of relatively young couple up on the stage. Now, they really think they know who these ghosts could be, and involves a famous performing couple called Lawrence Irving and Mabel Hackney. Now, these are names, unless someone's really into, early 1900s entertainment, people probably have never heard of, but they were big celebrities at the time. They were out of London, England, doing a North American tour, putting on lots of shows, and Winnipeg was the final stop on their tour. But by the time they finished here, they were homesick. They were ready to get back to England. So as soon as they wrapped in Winnipeg, they took a train from here to Quebec City, and they got on a large passenger liner. It's 1914. It's called the Empress of Ireland. Now, everyone, of course, has heard of the Titanic, but the Empress has almost been forgotten about in history. Now, it wasn't quite as fancy as the Titanic, but it was still a really impressive boat. So they board. Again, they're celebrities. They're in first class. The ship departs. It's heading down the St. Lawrence, and a very heavy fog rolls in. And in the fog, a Norwegian freighter doesn't see the Empress and crashes right into its side. Now, because of the Titanic, they'd increased some of the safety, they'd increased lifeboats, but it didn't matter. It ripped a huge hole in the ship, and it started sinking super quick. Now, from some of the survivors, they reported seeing Lawrence Irving with his wife, Mabel. She looked very panicked, but he's telling her, "Don't worry, dear. We're going to be all right. We're going to get out of this." Tragically, that was not the case. The ship goes down. It claims over 1,000 lives. In fact, more passengers. The total death count was lower than the Titanic, but more passengers are lost on this one. Now, Lawrence's body is recovered floating in the St. Lawrence. Clasped in his hand is a piece of his wife's nightdress. Mabel's body is never found. After this happens, they actually put up a plaque in their memory in the theater. And the plaque is still, like, to this day, you can still go into the theater and find the plaque. Now, they weren't able to have a burial for her, have, the gravesite. As I said, her remains were never found. So sometimes people associate spirits going back to memorial, or in this case, they love being on stage together. That was sort of their whole life, was performing together. So many people think they're basically repeating their final performance over and over again at the Walker Theatre.
That's kind of romantic in a sad way.
It does have a little bit of romance too.
My goodness. And how often are they performing to this day in spirit form?
It seems to vary, because sometimes, as I said, it's people seeing them. Other times it's things like with the Doors. Times too, people have also came on stage, and almost the reverse of seeing them is they've heard a lot of clapping coming from the second balcony and cheering, even though that balcony is empty. So actually seeing the couple, sometimes it seems to be a lot, and then there almost seems to be years where they're not seeing, and then there's witnessed a lot more. But overall, there's numerous people have told me different encounters that they've had at that theater. So they suspect that they're haunting it, but they actually think there could be, maybe there's even other ghosts there too.
Merle.
Yes, one story that caught my eye when I was reading up some haunted locations in Winnipeg was the correct me if I'm saying it wrong, the Delnavert House, the Victorian-style house. Kind of creepy how I was reading that all the mirrors are covered in black cloth, portraits on the walls are covered with cloth. There's a coffin in the parlor, all the clocks are stopped. Why?
Yeah, so Delnavert, it is kind of a tricky name. House. It's an old Victorian house. It's actually coming on the cover of the book. It's the cover of Haunted Winnipeg. That is Delnavert on the cover. The house was our first Sir Johnny Macdonald's son, so our first Prime Minister's son. It was actually his house. And they've had a lot of strange things there. Rarely do people report seeing stuff, but they hear stuff. And you're talking about black drapery or coffins. At one point when someone passed away, they would have often the body would be put sort of in state, in the parlor, in the house. And in some cases it would take time for relatives to get there. So they would actually have lead-lined coffins to help preserve it. Because of course it's not like now where you can hop on a plane and stuff. It took a lot longer to travel. In addition to that, just some of the traditions happening with the Victorians would be like taking photographs of the dead, which I find very creepy. And there's a lot of resources online if anyone sort of Googles it, for Victorian death photos. They would take these pictures of someone who had passed away, The creepiest ones are, there's actually sometimes when it's children that died, and they would pose them next to their still living siblings, which I can't imagine what that what that did to the brother or sister. But they had a lot of these traditions, and the house is now a museum. And they, around Halloween, they like to talk about sort of some of the Victorian customs, and they have strange things happening too. Like sometimes it smells, like in the study, people get this strong smell of pipe smoke or tobacco smoke, even though the house has been non-smoking, for decades. Or in the kitchen, they'll smell like fresh baked bread, but it's not a functioning kitchen. Toys from one of the children's room will get scattered on the floor or in the stairwell, and certainly hearing things too. One person told me she had been doing something in the basement and kind of clearly heard footsteps above her and on the stairs. And there was one volunteer in the house, so she thought the person was coming to ask her something or check on her. But when she went over to the stairs, no one was there. Went back up, found the volunteer. They hadn't moved from their spot at all. Actually, kind of a weird one. I'd been there with a group of people, and there was this big old wardrobe up in the attic, and no one was close to the wardrobe, like not within 20, 30 feet of it. And as we were just talking there, the doors just swung wide open. Now, might just be shifting or something like that, but pretty creepy things. So there's a lot of unusual things like that happening at the house. But there were, I know obviously you have listeners from all over, but if people are in Winnipeg, it's one that lets people tour the house. And especially in October, they like to do either themes dealing with Victorian customs with death and ghosts, or they'll sometimes do themes like based around Dracula and stuff. So where some people are almost afraid to talk about it, they're fairly open about it.
Having ties to John A. Macdonald, Canada's first prime minister, is there a lot of that first Canadian type of history and folklore that goes along with the ghosts there?
It might be, but it's kind of unclear because they recreated one room, as I said, almost to be like this children's room, but there were never any young kids living in the house. But his, in this case, Hugh John Macdonald, who's the one who owned the house, the son of the Prime Minister, his son, so this would be the Prime Minister's grandson, had diabetes. And at the time, they didn't really know anything about diabetes, and they certainly didn't have any treatment for it. So he was very often ill, very often sick, and died when he was only 19 years old. So many people think some of it's connected back to sort of his tragic life, but also Hugh John Macdonald, the Prime Minister's son, he had a difficult life. Like his mother died when he was really young. His father was so involved with, obviously politics, being Prime Minister. He was sent, to spend most of his time with relatives. His father dealt a lot with alcohol and being an alcoholic. So he had a fairly troubled life. And then his first wife died quite young. So again, people think it potentially could be his spirit connected to it. But no one has ever seen him. So if he's showing himself, it's through these scents and smells and sounds, but not as actually an image, though. That particular house has had a number of investigations take place at, and people have reported it being one of the best for when they're taking photos, sometimes seeing like orbs and lights in the photos. Out of all the places that they've investigated, they said Delnavert seems to be really high for that.
That's very cool. Very, very cool. I think we got time for one more location here. So we got about 5.5 minutes before we got to go to break at the top of the hour. Merle and Matthew Comas are our guests tonight on Ghosts of the Great White North. Matthew, let's continue on here. Here's a good one. I know you've talked about this a lot, about the Seven Oaks house, but what about the Bleak house? What's happening there?
So Bleak House was the one I mentioned a little bit with the Métis about the girl being seen sort of by the fireplace. I actually heard from someone. He remembers Bleak House when the daughter was still living there. This would have been, I guess, 1950s, and the house. It's kind of, even today, it's a little bit of a creepy house. There's kind of a little lane leading up to it and a lot of trees. And he was the paper boy for the neighborhood, and recalls having, when he had to go collect, and well, of course, now in the summertime it stays light to 10 o'clock, but in the winter it's getting dark very early. So often when he was doing his rounds collection, he said he had to walk down this lane. There were no lights, and she had one kind of dim sort of light bulb on in the porch, and it always just scared him. He said it was the one house he would sort of leave to last on his route. You didn't see a ghost, but just having to go through these trees down the lane and have this very old lady sort of come out with the payment, never liked visiting it. Now people seem to see someone looking out the windows, and again, whether it's the daughter who lived to be quite old, or other times it's a young girl seen. And when I was doing research on Bleak House, it was interesting because people talked about 14 kids or 5 kids, or the numbers kept varying. And I'm like, well, there's a big difference. Even if you're bad at math, you should know the difference between 5 and 14. But it's this realization, we forget how many children died young with the lack of hospitals, with disease. Babies would pass away. It just was the reality. Not everyone made it to adulthood. So a lot of their children died at quite a young age. So many people think that could be the connection to this girl that's now haunting the house. And it's quite close to Seven Oaks. So it's also would have been part of that battlefield too. So might be a connection to that too.
Very interesting. Merle, you have a question. We got about just over 2.5 minutes.
I did. I'm going to save it for top of the hour, but I have another location question because I've been there too. Correct me if I'm saying it wrong. Fort Loren, Ren?
Yeah.
I've seen and read a lot of stories there. Have you had any? What would you say is the best ghost paranormal story from there?
I don't know too many. Maybe if you've had an encounter there, we can hear about it after the break, because I did sort of was setting up some interviews with people there, but they were having kind of the people who had been running it were changing and new people were being brought in. So I was never actually able to get any of the stories from them sort of first account, but I do know it is supposed to be definitely a haunted place from people that have worked there. But honestly, I don't actually have a story that I could provide. It was on my list of ones that I was hoping to get in the book, but didn't make the final cut. So
sounds like you got a pretty haunted province there, man. It really does.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you have a lot, as we got about 90 seconds, do you have a lot of those just regular city type stories? Every city seems to have that the white lady who is looking to hitch a ride with someone. Do you have that story too? Like every city seems to have?
I think we do have a lot of those stories. And over the years, people have sort of shared a lot of stories from either from their own houses or experiences. And I've found for the books, why I chose to focus just a more historic or known building is if you include just someone's house in the suburb and strange occurrences, you can't give the location. Of course, it's a private home. And the story could be Winnipeg, but it could be Vancouver. It could be really anywhere. So by trying to focus on the more historic buildings, I liked how I was able to sort of tie it in an actual spot. And then a few of these buildings are still private places, but a lot of them people can go visit, whether it's a museum or a government building or a business, so they can actually check it out. So that's kind of we definitely have those stories. That's kind of why I focused a bit on the history ones, is it lets people explore a little bit more on their own.
And that's always a good thing. That's always a good thing, because it sounds like paranormal wise, with tours and with ghost walks and everything, that there's a real appetite for this subject and this learning of history through the spirits in Manitoba.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been doing tours now for over 10 years, and you kind of wonder, is it running its course? But every year we're getting more people out and more. When I started, there were very few of us doing this. As I said, I was the only one doing a walking one, and one person did a bus tour. And now there's multiple groups doing haunted houses and tours and projects. So there's a lot of interest. And I think that's true in Winnipeg, but I think that's in some ways true across all of North America.
Very true. Very true. Gentlemen, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because we are going to go to break here at the top of the hour. 2 hours down. We got hour 3 coming up. The first half hour, we'll continue with Ghosts of the Great White North with our special guests, Matthew Comas and Merle from Paranormal Road Trippers on Ghosts of the Great White North. Once again, it happens once a month around this time. And then we get to the SOR Newswire and the Thought of the Dave. More Spaced Out Radio coming up right after this. All right, gentlemen, I got to run my dogs out again. I'll be right back. You guys chat away.
All right.
Don't talk too much, Merle.
Yeah. It's an olive check. I'll be right back. I would love to go to Manitoba and investigate there.
Yeah, no, there'd be a lot of places to check out for sure. And we've been lucky too, because like COVID numbers been pretty low, so a lot of stuff is, not everything, but a lot of the museums and places are opening up, and tours and stuff are starting up again. So,
do you do tours year round?
I don't. Sometimes by special request, I'll do something in the winter, but winter tours just never seem to go well. No. It's usually one person really wants to go, and the rest of the group is freezing and not having a good time. And I had one person once, slip on ice and stuff. And so, yeah, no, I tend to stick to I do the vast majority of it in the fall, but I'll do stuff in the summer too, and spring, summer, but not the winter.
Are there a lot of paranormal teams now out there investigating and doing their things?
I don't know too many. Like one outfit called Square Peg Tours I work with. She actually does a lot of sometimes my bookings too. She'll run investigations, but more, not so much a team, more like paid ones. Like people come out and she'll walk them through an investigation. Like they'll spend 3 hours at a building, or 3-4 hours. There is one group that has been doing some investigations. I don't really know them too well. I tried talking to them a bit about the book, but they were a little bit reluctant to take part. So I know they're definitely around, but I don't really know too much about them. And there had been a group out in Brandon, but I'm not sure if that's if they're still active or not.
Mm-hmm. I had my cousin out here last year to Vancouver. And he's from Manitoba, and I took him to some pretty haunted locations. There's a place right on the U.S. border in a town called Surrey, called the old hotel called the Pink Palace. That's the slang for it. And it's one of the Lower Mainland's most haunted locations. It's where all like the modern day gangsters would run their drugs and have closed door meetings with people that never came back out alive of the doors, if you know what I mean. And Yeah, no, and we got a lot of good evidence there. And he's wanted me to go out to Manitoba and bring my gear to a few places. He's pretty excited for that. Maybe Manitoba's over.
Yeah, there'd definitely be some places to check out here, and some, as I said, like Hotel for Gary has been done a lot. Like almost everyone in the city for sure knows about that one, but I like sometimes digging out the ones that people know not too much about. And as I said, like Seven Oaks was one that hadn't really been covered at all, and put it in the first book, and now it's kind of has the reputation of probably being the most haunted house in the city.
Or the SS Kenora, is that what it's called? Kenora?
I haven't heard too much about that one. I think I tried to reach out to them too, actually, because that's up at Selkirk, right? I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tried to reach out to them, but never heard back. They do a big haunted house type of attraction with it.
Well, that'd be cool.
Every October, if they're not flooding, I think they tend to do it every year. But yeah, people kind of, as I said, Winnipeg and more landlocked, but with the rivers and Hudson Bay, it's the Maritime Museum up there.
Mm-hmm. It was neat researching like a bunch of the haunted locations before you came on the show. It just brings back a lot of memories because for, like 10 years, I'd be sent out there for at least half a summer and stay out there. And just seeing all these locations from when I was little, I was like, oh man, because I've been to a lot of them, like Lower Fort Garry. I'd love to go there now.
Yeah. And Lower Fort Garry's also really like a lot of places I talk to, it's sometimes harder to get the stories, or you get one person. But Lower Fort Garry was really open to, like, they sent probably like 2,500 word document, and this is government. Like sometimes government will just be like, oh, we're not haunted, go away, sort of thing. So they were very open to stories. I think just because they have so many.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, we got 1 minute.
It's kind of interesting.
All right. I like talking to people from outside of British Columbia because BC's so new compared to like Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec. Like, sure, we have cool history from like the late 1800s, but you guys go further back, even like early 1800s and all that stuff.
Well, and I think we're lucky too, as I said, that a lot of it remains in Manitoba. Like I do a lot of my tours in the downtown Exchange District, where there's 140 heritage buildings, which Calgary, Edmonton, Regina, Vancouver has a little bit of that.
Oh God, they knock them down here. Like,
yeah.
But that's it.
Vancouver doesn't care about history; they care about looking good. And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, we only got about 10 seconds. Hey, thank you so much for tuning us in on YouTube tonight. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it if you haven't already. Here we go with hour number 3.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Here we go with a jam-packed third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time out for us. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and on the digital side on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. Remember, you can check out all of our archives for free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor. Hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Mucopurulent. I can't say that word, but the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. For the final time tonight, we introduce MERLE. He joins me for every Ghost of the Great White North once a month. And our special guest tonight, author Matthew Comas, who has a couple of great books on Amazon regarding ghosts from his home province of Manitoba. And I want to just mention these books because you should get them. They're great writings, great pieces of Canadian history. Haunted Winnipeg, Ghost Stories from the Heart of the Continent. And the second one is Haunted Manitoba, Ghost Stories from the Prairies. You can find them once again on Amazon. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Merle, you had a question you wanted to start things off.
I did. Out of all the stories you've written about, or ones you haven't put in your books yet, or ones that just come to your mind now, what is one story that sticks out in your mind that gives you like that WTF scare? I'll go scare factor, where it sounds super unsettling.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a little bit, like I mentioned a little bit about the girl in the cottage earlier in the show, like that one's definitely up there. But another one involves a newer building. Like we always think of haunted buildings as, something like old and Victorian and ornate, but this particular building, it's called the Manitoba Theatre Centre, and it's a theater. It puts on everything from Shakespeare to musicals, and it's 1970s modernist architecture, so a lot of cement and bare concrete, that sort of design. So it's not what we would think of as a haunted building, and it's not that old. But they initially had reports of more of a friendly ghost, things like a young boy running around and kind of playing jokes and pranks. And he was almost seen, as I said, like a friendly ghost or a mascot. No one was too freaked out by him. But then they also had some other stuff happening that really started to freak them out. And there was two incidents that come to mind. The first was, they were locking up one night, or actually there's only one person left, the house manager, who's in theaters, kind of the house manager's in charge of everything outside of the show. So they're often the last to leave. And he was making sure all the doors were locked. And he cut through the auditorium down one row of seats. And he just heard someone just scream at him, just yelled, "Get out!" He said at the top of their lungs, just screamed. And it so freaked him, he ran, grabbed his jacket and out the building. And he said he realized he had bruised his shins because he was hitting all the chairs and furniture. He was in such a panic to get out of there. And he worked at that space for many years, but did not want to go back into the auditorium once he was closing. Like once he was alone, he stayed out of that space. But they had an even weirder incident. They were putting on a play called The Weir, and it was a production that actually of ghost stories. It was a ghost story play. And they were getting people's complaining. They have a headset system. So if you're hard of hearing, elderly, you can wear these headphones and it connects right into the sound system. So it amplifies the actors' voices. But people were complaining that the system was cutting out. Now, no one's thinking supernatural. It's electronics, doesn't always work. But they started getting a few complaints like, okay, something's up with the system. So one day it's a little bit quieter. One of the employees is like, I haven't seen the play yet. So like, I'm going to go watch it today and I'm going to wear the headset. So they put on the headset. They're watching the play. They completely forgot they were wearing it. It just became engrossed in the show until sound just cuts out. And at first they almost couldn't figure out why. And then they remember the headset, take it off. They can hear fine. But again, they're not thinking paranormal. It's okay. They're like, well, something's not working. So they're looking at it, but they can't find anything wrong with the headsets, with the sound system. So they try it another night. A few other employees try it, wearing it, different productions, different days. Every single one of them said it cut out. But it only started freaking them out when they were like, well, when did it cut out? For every single person that the sound system cut out, it was always the exact same moment in the show. And it's when one of the actresses playing the role of a mother was talking about how her child had died and had just came back as a ghost. And that's when the system stopped working. So that really sort of freaked them out at that point. So it's not so much a story about seeing something, but when they realized this experience was happening to so many different people, that became sort of a really spooky one.
No kidding. That is just kind of creepy. Kind of creepy right there. That just kind of freaks me out. Hey, let's go back into your book, Haunted Manitoba, here for a moment. New Iceland. All right. There's a number of stories around Camp Robertson, Devil's Island, Healing Ghost. I'd love to hear about them.
So yeah, again, a lot of stories coming from that community. Some to deal with the islands. Again, I said Lake Winnipeg's a really large lake. Like, we forget when we talk about the prairies how much history there is connected to sailing and to fishing. And on one of the small islands in the lake, they had to build a lighthouse because ships were wrecking against the rocks. And you can imagine, being a lighthouse keeper, it's a pretty lonely job, even more so in a place sort of as remote as Manitoba at the time. But the fellow that was the lighthouse keeper on this island, he was a bit of a character and was known for having a peg leg. At some point, he had lost his leg and would walk around with a pegged leg. Now, he died quite abruptly, not mysterious circumstances, just passed away unexpectedly. And they realized, damn, we can't leave the lighthouse, turn it off because, the ships are still out sailing. So they had to get a replacement right away. So a fellow comes in to take over from the lighthouse keeper and apparently goes about the job. But again, this is, we don't have radios and phones at this point. So a few days pass and someone goes over to the island to check on him. And they get there and he's not in the house, and they look around and the island's not that big, but they can't seem to find him on the island. So eventually they go to the lighthouse and realize he's at the very top, sitting on the trap door, and only opened it when he was sure it was the person coming to visit him. And he's, paled and flustered, and comments that why he was up in the lighthouse is every night when he was going around doing his work, he would first hear, then see the old lighthouse keeper coming out. But he said he could hear the thunk, thunk, thunk of the peg leg. And then eventually he would actually see the ghost, and he seemed to check out the lights and look around, almost like he was still doing his job, still, trying to check everything off on the list. So this made him obviously very spooked, and even more so, you're on a small island and there's nowhere to go. So I guess that's why he decided to eventually go to the very top of the tower. And I mean, you would think a ghost could just go through the trapdoor, but he felt, I guess, by sitting on the trapdoor, it gave him a little extra protection. So that's certainly one of kind of the freaky ones up from New Iceland.
A lot of the ghosts you have talked about, they seem to be pretty friendly. They seem to be very cordial and wanting, almost like they're wanting to show off what they're doing and how they're doing things. Are there any spooky stories from Manitoba? Are the ghosts just that polite there?
Yeah, maybe our license plates say friendly Manitoba, so maybe the ghosts follow that too. Certainly a lot of them seem to either be sort of more polite or almost don't even notice if there's people there. But there are definitely a few exceptions. Like early in the show, I talked about nests, like the old cemetery, and that's one where people felt very much, they describe it almost as evil, a presence there, voices calling to them. And where it's located, Nest, like I mentioned it earlier, being a cemetery that was turned into a farm, but it's right on the Icelandic River, and it's kind of a marshy area, and the Icelandic River leads into Lake Winnipeg, so there's a fishing community. And so you got kind of almost like a bog or marsh area, and people have heard like these voices calling them to go further into the land, further into the space, coming in. And this is a very dangerous area to go walking or hiking through. So that definitely does not seem to be a friendly ghost up there for sure. But overall, there doesn't seem to be too many that are, certainly a lot that would be spooky to see, but not so much ones that seem to be trying to hurt or harm people. That does seem to be relatively rare in the province.
Well, I guess that's a good thing, because we always hear these stories of these, so-called demons that are out there trying to rip people's faces off and trying to, get under their skin and scare people off. And if that's not happening in Ontario, that's actually, I think, a pretty good thing. What do you think, Merle?
I agree. So I'm just curious to know if they beat my question. I'd love to one story of somebody getting attacked or anything like that you know of.
It's a good question. I'm trying to think if I know of more like poltergeist or someone being attacked by a spirit. Now I'm trying to think if I do have one. Yeah, a lot of it more has been seeing things, hearing things. I might have me stop. There may be. I'm just trying to think if I can recall enough. Well, not so much attacked, but having another old theater called the Pantages Theater. It's a vaudeville theater. They were cleaning up for one night after a show, and one of the people was cleaning up on stage, and she saw the big they have big red curtains hanging down, and she saw the curtain kind of swinging or moving, and thought, okay, this is bizarre. Like, no one was here at the time. And she went to take a closer look, and so when she got to the curtain, it basically wrapped itself around her. Obviously, very freaky thing to happen. But she had been told that this ghost liked to play pranks, and if something happened, by other staff had told her, just try to laugh or try not to have a big reaction. So she just kind of laughed, and so the curtains went back in place. But it seems to be with this particular ghost, if she had started to scream, which understandably, obviously most people would do, or really freak out, whatever's happening intensifies or continues to happen. Now, it's not necessarily someone being physically hurt, but it's definitely more of a sensation or more of a haunting, where if you just kind of laugh or let it go, it tends to stop. And they also have, again, not so much physical occurrences, but in the basement, certainly one of the creepiest ghosts. And it's the basement hasn't changed very much. It's a bunch of old dressing rooms, and there's lots of little like passageways and tunnels and a trap door, like the magicians actually used to use back in the vaudeville days. And down there, people have seen a young girl holding a doll. Now, the girl doesn't seem to approach people, but I mean, just seeing her, it's spooky enough in this, dark kind of basement. And they tried to figure out why she'd be haunting the theater. And they were never able to get a clear answer. They even brought in a medium. She thought it was connected to some sort of accident or tragedy, but there's no record of a girl dying in the theater. But there were some buildings on the site that were torn down when they constructed the Pantages. So people think maybe the girl was living in one of these apartments, and that's when the incident happened to her. So very sort of spooky thing. Now, as I said, not so much physical. Now, I was in this building once and had been showing some people around, not so much connected to ghosts, but more dealing with the history of the theater. It was nighttime, so it got dark, and I let them out of the building and then realized I'd forgotten to turn off some of the lights. Now, at this point, I'm the only person in the building. This is a huge old vaudeville theater. So it's kind of spooky to begin with, especially because I'd heard all these ghost stories, and I realized I'd left the lights on in the basement. So I go through across the stage, down the stairs, and however it's designed, the light switch is at the far end of the hallway, which they always seem to be in, spooky buildings. Go down the hallway, flip off the lights, and just kind of, the sensation, you're getting pretty nervous. So I walk really quickly out of the basement. Didn't see the girl, but I get on stage, and the stage, I swear it was empty when I walked down. But right in the center stage, right in the middle, like an old hat, like an old fedora is just sitting there. And I mean, maybe someone just left it. Like, I don't know for sure, but there's no props, there's no costumes, there's nothing else on stage. And I swear I would have seen it when I walked by first with my tour group and then when I went to turn off the lights. But neither time did I see this hat until I had emerged from the basement, and it's just sitting in the middle of the stage, and thought about going over to pick it up or to look at it. But at that point, my nerves sort of had enough, and I just very quickly got out of the building, turned off the last light, and locked the door. So maybe not a nasty or evil ghost, but certainly a creepy one, and one that I did not want to, and it sounds like other people that have worked there do not want to spend any time, talking with or encountering.
Interesting. Very interesting. That is for sure. We only got about 5.5 minutes left with you tonight, and I want to say thank you for coming on because, some of these stories have been absolutely fantastic. Out of all the stories that you have written about, and there are a number of them in your couple of books, what are your favorites? What are the ones that stick out to you?
I think some are ones I've kind of talked about a bit already. Like the one at the Walker Theater, I do like with the couple that went down on the Empress of Ireland, because it's sort of the story of the ghost, but as you says, it almost has that romance, and it's tied to a big historical event, and it's tied to a particular place. Because sometimes with ghosts, you just never know why a place is being haunted or who's haunting it. But to have one that really connects back to history, so that's certainly one that stood out over the years. And not so much necessarily a ghost story, but another one that where I start my tours is from a place called Old Market Square. It's a park. It has a lot of festivals and concerts now. But it used to be where they would execute people in the city, where hangings took place. And I just find it very, it's sort of sometimes weird feelings there, not so much seeing something, but that now, unfortunately, with COVID, there's not the big festivals this summer, but big beer gardens and concerts and bands and celebrations, and everyone's out there having a good time. But if you think you're, sitting there enjoying your beer in the summer, 140 years ago, there was a gallows with someone swinging from the gallows right above where you're sitting. So again, it's something that just sticks out about how we sort of forget how places change. And that's kind of why I like bringing out the history and the ghost stories is we so often think of just stuff in the moment in the day, but have to realize, these places, this space has been here a lot longer than we have. And it's had many different versions or many different people and stories connected to it.
So with that, out of the stories you haven't written about, in future books, if you decide to write, which stories would you like to include? What haven't you discussed yet?
I would like to, as I said, try to get a little bit more from northern Manitoba for sure. That would be one. And I've also I've focused on Manitoba, but I have been talking to some other people about potentially going further afield. One that I don't really have in my books, but I do have an interest in railway history. And there's a lot of ghosts connected to railway stations and trains and that whole history. So that's something I've wondered about exploring it wouldn't be Manitoba, it'd be all of Canada. But looking at ghost stories or paranormal events that connect back to the railways.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot there. I'm sure there is, especially here in British Columbia. I would love to do a ghost tour through the Fraser Canyon, where literally hundreds of people died, falling to their deaths, whether it was because of loose gravel, whether it was because of explosions, their bodies never being found, being eaten up by the Fraser River. I mean, literally, it's a deathbed out there. It really is a deathbed out there. And that's part of the problem that we have. There's so many of these ghost stories out there that we just can't figure out how to tell. Now, hockey question for you. Has anybody ever tried to remove any sort of curse from the Winnipeg Jets to try and get them more success in the hockey playoffs?
Not that I know of. Maybe they're a little too new a team for Curse. I don't know, but we're hoping. Guess a couple of years ago they did not too bad when they beat Nashville, but we'll see. Well, at least some team in Canada needs to win the cup. But
well, I know they've tried that in Montreal. That there has been they've tried lifting the curse of 1993, which hasn't happened yet. And I know that psychic people have tried it with the Canucks, but it just doesn't happen. One day, the curse will be removed. Hey, Matthew, do me a favor. Tell everybody once again the titles of your books and where they can find them.
Yeah, for sure. So the books are Haunted Winnipeg, which is Ghost Stories from the Heart of the Continent, and Haunted Manitoba, Ghost Stories from the Prairies. So they're both through Great Plains Publishing. So Amazon carries them. If you're in Canada, like Indigo Books Chapters, their websites, or if you're living on the prairies too, like McNally Robson Booksellers, their website, you can order them. So a lot of places carry them. And they're also, if you're someone that likes having it as an ebook, they're also available in that way too, as ebooks. So
awesome.
And it gives a lot of local history and lots of ghost stories connected to that history.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us tonight. And Merle, always a good time with you, my friend.
It was a good show.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
All Merle, all day, all night, once a month here on Ghosts of the Great White North on Spaced Out Radio. Matthew Comas, thank you so much again for joining us. We really do appreciate you taking the time. Coming up next, we have the SOR Newswire and the Thought of the Day. Stay tuned. Spaced Out Radio continues after this. That's a good, solid show, guys. Let's give you a clap there. Good, solid show. Manly show. You know,
thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, Matthew, the audience really enjoyed your storytelling. I'm reading a lot of the comments here, and let me tell you, they are liking what you brought to the table tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks again.
Well, I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, no, I did.
It was good.
When you get that next book out, you get a hold of us, and we'll bring you back on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Merle?
Dave.
You're one hell of a band member tonight. You were like the bass guitarist, man. You were like the bass guitarist tonight. Just solid in your rhythm.
Always.
Yeah. You know, I was watching, my daughter had a band concert today. Okay, their year-end band concert, but because of COVID, they had to do it all on video. So all the kids are in their own houses, and they're broadcasting and playing their music all from the computer, right? Which in a way, honestly, it was kind of cool to watch. But then I noticed on the far right of the screen, there's this young lad playing the triangle. That's his only job, is to hit the triangle. And I said this out loud. I said, and I pulled my son over, and I said, "See this?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Never be the triangle player.
No.
Never be the triangle player." I said that.
I agree.
I said that's the soccer player of a band. There's a guy who plays the triangle.
Oh boy.
And he looks at me, and my son is 6, Matthew, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, Dad, I would never play the triangle. I rock." And I said, "Go play your guitar, son." And he goes, "Okay." And he went and hammered on his Jackson for a little bit. Love it. Love it.
Excellent.
Yeah. Never want to be the triangle guy. Never want to be that guy.
I was always the drummer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or the lead guitarist.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, I got to run here. I got to get the news ready. Thank you so much for coming on, guys.
All right,
right.
thanks.
All
Have
right.
a good night.
Take care,
Wow.
guys. Good night.
All right, bye.
That's Merle and Matthew. Hi, Sandra. Hi, Sandra. Hi, Sandra. Good, solid show there. Good, solid show. We can be happy with that one. We can be happy with that one. All right. Got to get the news ready here. Since I only have a couple of minutes now. Oh, for God's sakes, I hate when that happens. Probably should have done this a little bit different. I got 4 stories up. I thought I had more. 2. Where are all my stories going? My stories are like disappearing. What the Sam hell is going on here? Okay, this is weird. This is totally weird. Well, there's number 5. Did it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now where's the soccer player? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, here we go. No time to find any other ones.
ChiveCharities.org and become a donor today.
We rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. Thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate the time. I want to remind all of you that if you missed most of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire, plus much more. Speaking of the news, let's get to it, shall we? Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio for the show, and my personal handle at Dave Scott SOR. Here comes the news. The news is always changing, which is why we bring you the SOR Newswire at the back end of every show, where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and sometimes the abducted. Former Argentine footballer or soccer player Guillermo Moreno once turned up late to a training session and explained it was because he had been abducted by aliens, ex-teammate Gustavo Lorenzi said. The pair were together at a club side at Universidad de Chile under manager Jorge Sampaiola from 2011 to 2013. And Lorenzetti recounted Moreno's excuse in great detail. Guillermo is a friend who football gave me. Lorenzetti said. Regarding this story that Guillermo wanted me to tell, the truth is that I doubt whether I should tell you, because he is going to receive calls from channels of other information and not from sports, but I will explain it because he asked. He said that he arrived late one training because he was abducted by aliens. He gave us the entire explanation of what he felt and the rest of it. There are cases where a player says, I left and I came back 2 days later because I was kidnapped by aliens, but Guillermo isn't that kind of player. Guillermo was a very proper guy. Everyone knows that. He started to explain that he suddenly was lost and abducted by aliens. He explained that they take out your soul, analyze it, and all while on the journey, they are looking after you. He said something like that. Honestly, I believe in aliens. He gave a great explanation, and we will have to believe him. I don't know other types of channels. We'll have to call him so he can tell it better. But in any case, he was abducted by aliens. Asked whether he believed what Guillermo said, I believed in him because he tells you that way, and if you know him, you realize that he is a very serious person. He is the kind of person who will not be late anywhere. He is very correct. He explains it to you. He is a big believer. He reads books about it, so I didn't have any other options but to believe him. But with all seriousness that he told it to us, we have to believe him. Lorenzetti could not say for sure, however, whether Sampaoli shared his belief Marino was telling the truth. He goes, I don't know if Guillermo would have told Sampaoli the same story, honestly. They must have had a chat afterwards to explain it to him. He added, but knowing Guillermo, I think he must have believed him. What can you say? This is worth a Discovery Channel series or something along those lines. Come on, Spaced Out Radio, soccer boy. Let's talk about this. A mysterious balloon-like UFO object has become a social media sensation after being spotted over Japan on Wednesday. Kyoto News first reported that the strange object was seen over northeastern Japan. Grainy images appeared to show a cross-like item hanging beneath the object, prompting speculation that it was a science experiment or a weather balloon. However, the Japanese Meteorological Agency's office in Sendai, in Miyagi Prefecture, told Kyoto News that it was not flown by their agency. Neither local government nor local self-defense forces knew what the object was, they added. The flying object created quite the buzz, especially on Twitter. Reuters reported that speculation ranged from UFOs to North Korean propaganda. Well, of course. However, ham radio operator AI6YR Ham described the object as a high-altitude balloon, somebody's high-altitude balloon and payload causing more UFO reports. This one doesn't have a transponder, unfortunately, he tweeted. Last month, a Japanese media report said that the country's defense agency will draw up plans for any potential encounters with UFOs. The report came after the Pentagon in the United States officially released videos of unidentified aerial phenomena. Here's a cool one. The blue cheese salad dressing, butter, ground turkey, cans of grain-free dog food, and a new toothbrush came to $24.97. That's when Lori Mallenbray handed the cashier a slice of wood marked $25 and walked out. What? The wooden currency is good only in the small city of Tenino, Washington, part of an effort to help residents and local merchants alike get through the economic fallout of the coronavirus pandemic. Decades after it created a similar program during the Great Depression, the city is dipping into its emergency accounts to give people in need up to $300 per month in wooden currency to spend. This is actually kind of cool. What a great way to take care of the citizens. Just about every business in town, from the gas station and auto body shop to Don Juan's Mexican Kitchen, is accepting the wooden scrip. The currency, made up of maple veneer, is about the thickness, size, and flexibility of an index card and printed on the same 1890s era press that once printed the Depression currency and the local newspaper. It can't be used for alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana. The business can redeem the script for real dollars at City Hall or sell them on the side. Some merchants said they have been offered 3 times the face value from coin collectors around the country. The city could have given out debit cards or cash, but we don't know where that money is going to go, said Tyler Whitworth, past president of the local Chambers of Commerce. This is one of the ways we could keep money here in the community. Tenino, population 800, is about a 25-minute drive south of the state capital of Olympia. Around the turn of the 20th century, it became a boomtown with 4 hotels and 11 saloons, as the stone from its several quarries was in demand to help rebuild Seattle and San Francisco following devastating fires. Nowadays, there are no hotels. The quiet downtown is a row of single-story shops. We're a small community that relies on a lot of tourism during the summer, said Mayor Wayne Fournier, who devised the plan to use the wooden currency again. Now everything's been shut down. Our businesses, our restaurants, antique stores, they're not going to have the traffic. There's no assistance available for them. We have to take care of them on our own. Malin Bray, one of about a dozen people who applied for the assistance in the program's early days, is a school bus driver. The company she works for has continued paying for her normal routes, she said, so she can't collect unemployment. But the extra trips that usually double her base income, driving students on field trips and teams to games, have dried up along with her compensation. She had to begin taking Social Security early, reducing the payments she will receive, and the company that provided her hearing aids has repossessed it. You got to be kidding me. A company repossessed their hearing aids? Oh, come on. That's an a-hole company right there. That's an a-hole company right there. Because she couldn't make the monthly payments due to COVID. How ruthless is that? Honestly, how heartless and ruthless is that there is a company out there that is actually repossessing hearing aids for people who can't afford to pay during the coronavirus? I would like to know what this company is. Look, we're all, we all have responsibilities. We all have to make our payments. But give people a break during this. Taking their hearing aids? That's the story I want to hear. Who does that? Which company out there is that heartless to take someone's hearing aids because they can't afford to pay during the coronavirus pandemic? I need to learn about this. That's what I want to hear. Anyways, she used $150 of her first monthly aid to pay her utility bill. When they came up with this, I was the first person in line down there. The 63-year-old said, she goes, I have no money. This really helps. Maria Williams, the owner of the Tenino Coffee Bistro, said she was proud of the city for taking the initiative to help its own residents. Most cities go to the next level up when they need help. Hello, Governor, she said, but this is all about what we can do for ourselves. While nonstop news about the effects of the coronavirus has become so commonplace, it has tales of kindness. One Good Thing is a series that AP does, so you can check that out. And you know what? The hearing aids. That bugs me. I mean, it's great what this town is doing. That's a good news story. I want to know that company. And everybody out there needs to email that company or message them and tell them what inhumane jerks they are. Repossessing a hearing aid because a person during the coronavirus who had their salary cut, no fault of their own, can't make the payments? That is as greedy as it gets. That's what I hate about humanity. That is one of the things I hate about humanity. Taking someone's hearing aids. There's got to be like an angel out there. If there's an angel who has enough money out there to help people, okay, and you're looking for something to do, call up this company, this jerk of a company, and see how many hearing aids they've repossessed. And go pay for a bunch of them. A few of them, maybe if you can afford a lot, go do it. All right? But that is just sickening. That is just absolutely horrifically sickening. how those collection companies can sit there and say, yeah, we need the hearing aids back because you missed payments. Well, coronavirus, I'm a school bus driver. I can't make the payment right now. Can I defer for a couple of months, please, to help myself out? No, we're going to come repossess them. So we'll have somebody knocking at your door within the next 48 hours. You sickos. And here's the worst part about it. Her credit is going to get screwed over this now because she got hearing aids repossessed during the coronavirus. And there's some idiot in office in the, I'm Canadian. So if it was up here, it would be like the British Columbia legislature. Okay. So in Washington state, I guess that would be one of the candidates or politicians in Olympia who's going to be like, yeah, there's nothing I can do. Yeah, I feel bad. Would you like some licorice? It's black. It's red. It's blue. It's green. It's yellow. You have your choice of color. Licorice, popcorn, glass of water in one of those paper cups. Those little paper cups. Unbelievable. Authorities in Texas were called to a family's home when they received an unexpected package. What was in the package? How about 32 bags of marijuana? Somebody was planning a big party. The Harris County Sheriff's Office said deputies were called to a Houston home after the residents reported receiving a package they hadn't ordered and that was allegedly filled with the hippie lettuce. If it is yours, please contact the Harris County Sheriff's Office to claim it, the sheriff wrote on their Instagram page. Marijuana is illegal to possess in Texas, apparently. Yeah, they don't like the devil's lettuce there. No. Guess they haven't learned from the rest of the world that it's not a gateway drug. Keep those fines coming. Another food brand is about to undergo an overhaul when it comes to branding and its use of racial stereotypes. Mrs. Butterworth's, which makes syrup, is to adjust the imagery of its packaging, which is supposedly to depict images of a loving grandmother. The decision came after the brands of Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's also announced plans to overhaul their branding in the wake of renewed calls for racial equality. On Wednesday, Mrs. Butterworth's announced it had begun a complete brand and packaging review of Mrs. Butterworth's, according to a statement by its parent company, Conagra Brands. The Mrs. Butterworth brand, including its syrup packaging, we stand in solidarity with our black and brown communities, and we can see that our packaging may be interpreted in a way that is wholly inconsistent with our values. The company said it understands its actions help play an important role in eliminating racial bias. It's heartbreaking and unacceptable that racism and racial injustices exist around the world, Conagra's statement said. We will be a part of the solution. Let's work together towards progress and change. Elsewhere on the supermarket shelves, Uncle Ben's Rice had announced it is evolving its brand and will redesign its packaging in response to concerns about racial stereotyping, hours after Quaker revealed it was scrapping Aunt Jemima. Parent company Mars, Inc. on Wednesday revealed that it was following suit and helping to put an end to racial bias and injustices by making changes to its branding, which has long featured a black rice farmer as its logo. As we listen to the voices of consumers, especially in the black community, and to the voices of our associates worldwide, we recognize that the one way we could do this by evolving the Uncle Ben's brand, including its visual brand identity, said spokesperson Carolyn Sherman. The company did not specify how or when the changes will be made, but said it is evaluating all possibilities. Just like Aunt Jemima, the Uncle Ben character, which has been displayed on the rice product since 1946, has long been criticized for its racist origins. According to the PR Museum, the term aunt and uncle in this context refers to white Southerners addressing older black people of African American slaves because they refused to give them the courtesy titles such as Miss or Mr. Aunt Jemima, which has been the face of the pancake syrup brand for over 131 years, has also received renewed criticism over the prolonged use of the character, which is based on the Mammy, a black woman who worked for white families nursing their children. Earlier, Quaker Foods said it would drop the name and logo after recognizing its origins are based on a racial stereotype as well. As we work to make progress towards racial equality through several initiatives, we also must take a hard look at our portfolio of our brands and ensure they reflect our values and meet our consumers' expectations, Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer Kristen Kropfel said. In a press release, the company said it had tried to update the brand over the years in a manner intended to be appropriate and respectful, but has since acknowledged those changes are not enough. And that's about it for the news. That's heavy enough for us, don't you think? Great clown tonight, Marty. Fantastic clown. I'm a fan of this. Thought of the Day happens every night at this time, where we ask a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, then read your responses on the air because we love the audience participation around here. Today's Thought of the Day is as follows. In a paragraph or less, what's the best haunted story in your town? Let's start off with Coral. I've heard that Tech, the big wages major mining employer in town, has some basement rooms in the plant that they are haunted with the souls of men that have died while on the job there. But that is just a rumor, and I would be too chicken to investigate them myself. Besides, you would have to be an employee to get access to them. Nicholas. Charles Camsell Hospital is the most well-known in Edmonton, Alberta, but La Boheme's caretaker killed his wife and disposed of her in the basement circa 1912. Apparently, you can hear the sounds of the body being dragged down the stairs. Ooh, that is creepy. Creepy. Tina. The music that still plays at midnight in the abandoned ballroom on the second floor, downtown Dallas. That would actually be really, really cool to hear. Really cool to hear. Edith. Morgan Monroe State Forest, one of the most haunted in the country. Noises, strange figures, a ghostly park ranger, and a mother who lost her children are among the active spirits people have reported. There are 7 cemeteries throughout the forest, some dating back to the 1700s. I have seen floating orbs with my eyes. Robert Kramer. The Houghton Mansion. It's been on Ghost Adventures. 5 minutes from where I live. Haunted as anything. You know, I was thinking about this question earlier today, about what is probably the most haunted building in my town, outside of the museum. And there are a few of them. There's the Emissaries, which was said to hold up women back in the day. And apparently there was some not good stuff going on there. But people often who live in that area will say when they look at the Emissaries buildings, they still see women banging on the windows trying to get out. Oh, that just scares me. The other one that scares me here, and I've actually investigated this, is the old Royal Canadian Mounted Police depot here. And when Flight 21 crashed, because the funeral home here didn't have enough room in their mortuary to keep the bodies, they stored them in the cellar of the RCMP depot. And when we opened up that door, this steel squared door to that area, I was debating, do I crawl in? Do I not? Yeah, I better crawl in, because it was pitch black. And I wanted to see what would happen in pitch black. And just as I was about to make that decision, I get this, whoa, right in my face coming from inside the door. I quickly grabbed my flashlight. I put my flashlight because the sound was coming from the right of it, and there was a cement wall right there. Something was trying to prevent me from going in. So I didn't. I gave them the respect. Thank you to everybody participating in the Thought of the Dave today. I really do appreciate it. We'll do it again tomorrow on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much for Merle coming on in from Paranormal Road Trippers in Vancouver, along with our special guest, Matthew Comas, and his couple of great books that you can find on Amazon about haunted Manitoba and haunted Winnipeg. And, of course, Captain Shirk for putting together one heck of a news wire. All of our news can be found at spacedoutradio.com. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be. Thank you to everybody participating in our chat rooms on Spreaker, YouTube, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Facebook, the SOR Space Travelers Club on our website, and to all the snarkers and snarkettes hanging out on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. You are fantastic tonight. I know you're out there somewhere. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends,
we're watching.
We own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Remember, everybody, the Woo train may have parked for the night, but tomorrow we shall ride again. The tracks will be red hot. Your seats are still available. Tickets never expire. Bring your friends along for the ride, because it's going to be a great one. Good night. That's a good show, people. That's a good show. We all did well there. I'm not going to lie. We all did very, very well there. Very well. Now I have to see if I screwed up the beginning of the show. I hope I did not. Oh, my head is hot from wearing those. Do 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 do. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. We are the man, I know you're out there somewhere watching me. All right, I can't type anymore. My typing is gone for a shit for the night. Who are the guests for tomorrow and Friday? All right, yeah, I gotta try and redo them first. They're up on the website. I can't get them on Facebook for some reason. Facebook is being it's having a malfunction with its events page. So some of them it's allowing us, and other ones it's not. So tomorrow night is Rich Giordano. We're going to talk about Ouija boards and his Ouija board experiences. Friday night, Derek, we're turning up the woo for you. We got Yossi Ronan coming in for ET Contact. So we got some power woo happening the next couple of nights, people. Big time power woo. Oh, I hope I didn't screw this up. I guess we'll know momentarily if I did. Oh gosh, why did that happen? Let's go this way. Excuse me. Oh yes, Derek. When and Corey can admit to this, I told him point blank that that on Friday nights, just for Derek, we gotta try and turn the woo factor up. Friday night woo is very important to the Twitter crowd. All right, let's see if this actually. Did Dave screw it up? I bet you he did. I bet you he did. Hold on. Son of a wife. From the tops of the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this son of a gun. All right, I got to add my intro in here now. All right, so this is what we got to do here. All right, where's my intro here? In there? Nope. Raw? In there? Let's try this one. No, that's going to be commercials. That's not going to be the... What the hell is this doing in here? Where's that garbage bin? You get in there. All right. Well, this just added a bunch of time to Dave. FML. Oh, let's try this. All right, let's go this way. All right, there we go. You're about to hear Dave created intro. Let's just about there. This is how we do it in the big city. All right, so we go from 20 seconds, which is right there. All right, we'll go right there. Nope, right here. And let's go this way. So what we're going to do here is we are going to fade this out. That envelope or stereo pan? I think it's stereo pan. Like this. Oh, it's envelope. All right. Let's go like this. Let's go like this. Let's go like this. And let's go like this. Just like that. Let's apply that.
Little brother has.
We're going right from there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to boost this up. Let's get rid of this right here. Okay. Sorry, I'm doing some editing here. This is serious shit because I forgot to put my intro on. I forgot to hit the button of my intro. I don't know why. I've never done that before. Oh, you gotta love it sometimes. All right, so we need to edit this. We need to affect that, amplify that. Wish I could show you guys what I was doing. That way you guys could see it. Oh. All right. And then what we do is we go like this. From the tops of the mountain. All right, so then we go like this. We want to get rid of those breaths. Now watch this, people. This is where it gets fun. Copy. Paste right about there. So we're going to paste mix. All right, give that a couple minutes and I'll be right back. And then I'll play it for you, the little bit of magic that we just created. Oh, it's magical. Be right back, everyone. Oh. All right, let's see how this sounds. From the tops of the mountains of central British Columbia. Oh, that's beautiful.
You'll have direct contact.
That worked out very well. That worked out very well. Good for us. We did it. We did it. Oh, for fuck's sakes. I gotta get this computer fucking done. Anyways, where is that? And move that there, and move that there, and these three up here, and that one there. All right, so where is that file now? And throw it in the junk. There it is. Put that there. All right. Now where to go? Hey, seriously, where did you go? Not Siri. Now I'm getting pissed off. There we go. Now we're working. Now we're working. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we can edit this bad boy. Today is 17th. Ghosts of the Great White North. This is 0617 KZAX. All right, let's edit this bad boy. How do you guys like the shorter commercial times? By a minute. They better for you? Because a minute, believe it or not, is a long time. Have you noticed it all? Good. No, Dave will never play Coldplay ever. You really have to hate yourself as a human being to play Coldplay. Good night, Doc. Thanks for coming on in. Mm-hmm. What's a happy ending? I wouldn't know. What kind of boy do you take me for? No, he doesn't, Gnome Squatch. No, he doesn't. Why would you try and spread such vicious lies like that? That's terrible. That hurts my feelings. I've added him, Corey. I've added Yossi. All right, where am I going here? I like Nickelback. Not a fan of Creed, but I do like Nickelback. I'm not afraid to admit it. All right, get your verification codes ready, people. It's that time of the night again. What is your 6-digit verification code? Your code for tonight is 798967. 798967. Hi, Eva. And your happy endings. Now let's see if I can get into the website here. See if Facebook's going to allow me. Who's on tomorrow night? Oh, Rich Giordano. Oh, let's see here. Where's his? I gotta go here to events. All events. There we go. Okay, that one published. Let's see if Facebook will give us another one. See if it'll allow us to do 2. Holy shit, it did. Oh, that's a wrong date. Oh, better edit this one. It's wrong date. There we go. Better message Captain Shirk. All right, let's see where we are. 32% and 3 files left there. The verification code is so I can send my show over to the radio stations. Anybody still here? The chat room seems to have gone quiet. Eva, are you still here? Hello, Philip Blair. The Philip Blair. Hello, Corns. Hey, Corey, did you get my email regarding Caroline Corey? Okay, cool. Thank you for that, buddy. Ow. That. Went to the gift site, Nick, on Sunday and checked it on out. And I think we may be getting some action up there soon. I do. I just have a feeling. It's just my feeling. Who makes a really good shoe? All right, everybody. I am done for the night. I would love to say thank you for tuning us in and hanging on out with us. I got to get to bed. I got to be up early for my day job tomorrow, but I appreciate you taking the time. And we'll talk very, very soon. And Rich Giordano, Ouija boards tomorrow night, man. It's going to be a good one. So we'll talk to you then, everyone. Blessed dreams, and thank you for the love. Thank you to Grendel and Mark for the super chat.